Among the crowd of hungry monsters and dust clouds, a boy is visible. His cloak flutters in the wind, and he stands fearlessly and steadfastly, as if he does not notice these evil creatures at all. This boy is an alchemist who combines several things into something completely new, and his technique also allows him to hide objects in space. Knowing that alchemy will solve any problem, the boy now confidently takes several magical swords from the storage undoubtedly created with the help of alchemy. The staff waved rays of light spread around, and a dozen swords instantly destroyed the threat. This boy is not an ordinary person. He is a genius, alchemist, vacant. The system completely shuts down, and at that moment the capsule doors open, releasing powerful gusts of wind and clouds of dust swirling around. When the capsule fully opened, Vacant carefully stepped out, holding onto the edge of the structure, putting his foot forward first and looking around in surprise. The boy, surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes, slowly turned and carefully examined everything around, trying to understand where he had ended up, but to his surprise, everything seemed strange and unfamiliar. Around him, only ruins, a pile of debris long overgrown with greenery. Once it was a beautiful building, and now only evidence of its former glory remains. Vacant faced a severe illness, and although he did everything possible to fight it, it gradually and relentlessly consumed his former body, which was once full of strength and health. A brilliant idea came to his mind, and as an experiment, he entered the cradle of rebirth to cure his illness. Because of this, he fell into a coma and slept for a very long time. The boy seemed to have fallen into a sea of joy and admiration, trembling from an incredible overload of emotions. When he realized he was still alive, which meant all his efforts had succeeded, indescribable happiness spread in his heart. Bacon threw his head back, confidently filled his lungs with air, and took a deep breath, feeling that his memory remained with him, and the disease that tormented him had receded. There were no more coughing fits. He smiled sarcastically, recalling the exclamations and anxiety of those to whom he had told about his idea. "See, my experiment succeeded," the alchemist chuckled. The hero suddenly turned around, saw his reflection in the mirror, and stunned by what he saw, stopped and carefully examined himself. The body was impressively rejuvenated, as if 20 again, restoring all the freshness and energy of his youth. But this was by no means sad news. Memories of the past remained with him, and in his soul he was still over 40. Vacant, feeling a surge of joy and smiling broadly, announced that he was determined to continue his deep research in alchemy, which he so passionately loved. But there remained one no less important question: what had happened, and why was the laboratory in such a state? Snapping his fingers, the alchemist ordered to start the test. The boy wanted explanations from Zosmos. In the silence, Bacon's order to his faithful assistant was heard. From the very sky suddenly descended a small flame, like a bright star shining dazzlingly. Zosmos' answer rang out in the air: "He is a fairy, artificially created by Vacant." The boy joyfully greeted his friend. It seemed they had not seen each other for a long time. Zosmos responded only to the owner's request. The check was completed. 501 years and 17 days had passed. Vacant, not believing what he heard, asked again. Fear gripped him. He exclaimed, not believing this could be true. 21 years. Horror was heard in his voice. He could not comprehend how this could have happened at all. He raised his hands up and with sincere surprise asked if he had really overslept so much time. In response, it was heard that the alchemist had been dozing in the cradle of rebirth for 521 years. But what happened to the laboratory? Where did everyone disappear? What will happen to the Morty's dynasty? There were many questions, but unfortunately no immediate answers were found. It was necessary to dig through the archives because Zosmos was in sleep mode. After checking the archives, the assistant reported that nothing was left, and the hero shouted in surprise, "How could this have happened?" The sage no longer worked, so the data from the archive could be inaccurate. The hero was puzzled about what happened. War or disaster? He had to calm down, and Zosm advised him to write everything down. The hero sat down and began to write down everything that had just happened, everything he knew about his rebirth, and about how long he had slept. Calming down a little and exhaling, Vacant realized that this was actually a very interesting situation. And indeed, all this was simply incredibly interesting for the alchemist. He even became excited. He not only managed to be reborn, he found himself in another time. The hero and the fairy rejoiced because everything succeeded. Years passed. Alchemy also changed, probably reached unprecedented heights. The alchemist enjoyed what had happened because so much new and exciting awaited him ahead. As a researcher, he was eager to look into the amazing future. Now it was a completely different era. With great enthusiasm and excitement, he imagined how today the cities were completely different, how the images of people filling the streets around him were changing, and how the streets themselves had transformed under the influence of time and new trends. It was impossible to say for sure whether the future had really changed so much, so the hero decided to check it with his own eyes and ordered the ferry to teleport him to the nearest city. Opening his eyes, Vacant was already standing on the ledge from where the whole city was visible, a completely ordinary city. Looking around the streets, the hero stood stunned. How could this have happened? Decimos, together with his master, looked around, swiftly flying over the rooftops of houses. Vacant, looking around confusedly, could not believe it. 500 years had passed, and the surrounding landscape had hardly changed. He had always imagined the future quite differently, but everything turned out otherwise. After some time, his assistant finally gathered some information from the archive, and even tiny details were now worth their weight in gold to them. They found themselves in a part of the country called the Kingdom of Juri in the city of Sauvan itself. This country is already 200 years old, and it is ruled by a king along with the aristocracy, a pure classic monarchy. Such was the verdict given by Zosim. And the most striking thing was that there was no mention of alchemists in this country, as if they had never been here. They neither lived nor worked, their trace was completely erased from history. He looked empty, seemingly calm, but there was clearly a bit of sadness and disappointment in him. He exhaled as if trying to release all the accumulated emotions and inner experiences. The alchemist exclaimed indignantly that this simply could not be, and it was impossible to believe, although the fairy was displeased. Alchemy can solve the most diverse problems of humanity. It is extremely important for humans. It is applied in various fields, and at the same time it simply cannot exist. The hero waved off the fairy's objections and insisted that one should not rely solely on archives. Everything must be checked personally, and Zosimos could only justify himself, saying that the Tower of the Sage is controlled by someone strange. Vacant, walking through the city streets, looked around with curiosity, around familiar buildings, passers-by, and usual everyday scenes, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing could catch his eye or hold his attention. Finally, he reached the market, which shone with bright colors and pleasant smells. Fresh vegetables, fruits, and various baked goods lay on the stalls, and people moved back and forth, each immersed in their own thoughts and affairs. Someone was discussing goods, someone was choosing the best, and someone was simply enjoying the local atmosphere. Suddenly, Bacon grabbed his stomach. He was rumbling with hunger, and it was very uncomfortable, even a little painful. The alchemist, preoccupied with his affairs, only now realized that he had not eaten or drunk anything for 500 years. He urgently needed to find money for food, but after 521 years, what could be bought with it had changed greatly, and it was hard even to imagine how much he would need. Bacon sharply turned at the sound of the merchant's voice, who unexpectedly spoke to him. The young man in a dark cloak tightly held a small bottle with a shining potion. He was sure it was a healing elixir that would restore health and strength. He also had an antidote. Without hiding his joy, Bacon rushed into the cellar, bombarding with questions whether he himself brewed the potion and whether he was an alchemist, and, receiving an affirmative answer, snatched the bottle from the young man in the cloak. The alchemist studied the vessel and its contents with keen attention, as if conducting a deep analysis and trying to understand the composition, taste, and aroma of the liquid inside, without even opening it. But the joy instantly turned into disappointment. It turned out to be just junk, not a potion made from the cheapest ingredients. The hero frowned. If he had done something so terrible, he would have forced himself to redo it 100 times, although perhaps this merchant simply had a very small profit. His stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble. Bacon had a lot of questions, but now he was more worried about something else. The merchant advised him to go to the tavern across the street. Above the door of this tavern hung a beautiful wooden figure of a duck in flight with widely spread wings, and next to it hung a sign, Dancing Duck. With curiosity and slight surprise, examining the simple but very beautiful building, the hungry alchemist could not help but smile. How could this unpretentious structure evoke such pleasant feelings? The hero and his assistant agreed amicably. The tavern was impressive from the majestic wooden figurine to the very roof. But Zosim raised a very important question. There was no money, and Bacon calmly decided that this was not a problem. Of course, he was an alchemist. His skills would easily cover all expenses, and if he had to wash the dishes, he would simply make a special machine for it. Pressing the bell to call a worker, the hero thought that the tavern owner was probably a good person. It was only necessary to explain, and he would immediately understand everything. A silhouette of a girl appeared behind the boy. She interrupted his thoughts with her question. The stranger wanted to know who this person was that had come here. When the girl came closer, her sad face was visible, her arms crossed over her chest, and her light wavy hair neatly tied with a scarf. she sadly said that the tavern was closed and asked them to leave. The alchemist and his assistant were gripped by panic. It seemed they were by no means welcome here. The desire to eat was stronger and he wanted to explain himself to the girl, but her apology interrupted him. The girl's eyes became glassy from tears rolling down her cheeks. Her father was bedridden due to a terrible illness, and she could not manage the tavern by herself. Bacon, hearing this, decided not to miss the chance. He introduced himself as an alchemist and immediately offered his help. While the girl was stunned, the alchemist and the fairy were already actively discussing this wonderful opportunity to pay for the room with medical services, but it seemed her surprise was turning into anger. Interrupting their hasty thoughts, she sharply swung her hand and struck the attacker in the face with all her might. A loud blow echoed throughout the building. Unable to hold back tears, the blonde cried and confessed that she would never trust an alchemist again because her father fell ill after drinking vitamins made by him. Bacon could not hide his amazement. He was eager to help the tavern owner and began begging the owner's daughter to let him in, but she categorically refused. The hero did not give up. He was ready to offer his services even for free, but the girl did not yield to persuasion. How could she believe such sweet words? Calming down a bit and organizing her thoughts, the girl finally decided to ask the question that troubled her. She looked at him with curiosity and asked why he was so persistently trying to help her father. Zosim took matters into his own hands, and while he said that they liked the tavern and that it was clear at first glance that the owner was a very good person, the owner only nodded in agreement, and the girl began to doubt. Waken's assistant convinced the girl that the alchemist was extremely experienced and immediately asked her to introduce herself. She was Fiora, a waitress of this tavern. Zosimus also introduced himself and said that he was an artificial fairy created by his master, who had invested his knowledge into him. When he wanted to introduce his master, he simply walked past. It seemed that he had already switched to alchemist mode and was fully immersed in solving the problem. The assistant introduced his lord as Vacant Ord, while the latter was already entering the room and a sick man was following the girl. In the corner of the cozy, well-furnished room stood a bed with the sick man. He was neatly covered, and he did not move at all, as if he was already in another world. The alchemist crept closer and saw a truly terrible sight. The man was rotting alive, disgusting ulcers were growing on his face, and the skin seemed to be peeling off the tissue of his face. Bacon immediately understood. This was not just poisoning by a potion, it was much worse. Poisonous decay inside the body was literally eating him from the inside. It was simply horrible and deeply disgusting. The daughter of that man, unable to hold back tears, told him that her father had fallen into a coma just yesterday, and immediately the whole room began to fill with a disgusting stench. The situation turned out to be much worse than the alchemist had imagined. It is simply outrageous how this was done by the inept, one might even say irresponsible alchemist. Besides selling low-quality goods, their treatment methods only make things worse. This can never be forgiven, and that is why Vacant was overwhelmed with terrible anger. This situation shocked him, and a storm of emotions ignited inside. Filled with determination and with the intention to change the situation, he raised his hand, and at that moment it was enveloped in a soft, pleasant light that radiated warmth. Confident in his strength and skills, he resolutely prepared to focus and see the matter through to the end. It was time to show everyone around his true potential and talents. Continuing to create, he ordered Param to find out what had brought the patient to such a state. He waved his hand, drawing a strange symbol in the air with light, and at the same time persistently urged Assistant A. Within a minute, an alchemical cauldron materialized in the room, creating a small space inside where conceptual information of various substances could be synthesized and replaced. Meanwhile, Zosmos discovered that the cause of this condition was improperly prepared potion, which was supposed to fight fatigue and restore endurance. Bacon was boiling with rage. It was precisely because of this that the poisoning occurred. Any amateur alchemist knows how to avoid this. The worried girl turned to the alchemist, fearing for her father, but the alchemist seemed not to listen to her. He was completely absorbed in his work. He continued to draw signs in the air, but now with both hands the movements became clear and confident, showing that he definitely knew what he was doing. Tender streams of wind swirled around the boy, and at the level of his head, 4 circles appeared. He, without losing seriousness and concentration on his face, noticed with obvious pleasure that the girl was very lucky in this situation. From all 4 circles, ingredients for the potion suddenly appeared: a mysterious herb, a couple of bottles, and a pouch. The alchemist added that the girl did not need to worry about her father. He was here and would help him. Easily throwing his head back, he enjoyed what he was doing. It must be said he had not felt such freedom and peace for a long time. Around him, as if in a magical atmosphere, flowed streams of energy and light, filling him with sincere joy and calm. When the ingredients finally appeared completely, Vacant directed them into the alchemical cauldron, and they swiftly flew in, leaving behind not only a dazzlingly bright trail of light but also a gentle light breeze. The pot began to glow so brightly and unusually as if a living fire had flared up inside it. Its light softly enveloped the entire room, filling it with pleasant warmth and creating an atmosphere of coziness and comfort. The alchemist spread his arms and continued to create energy and rays of light, and he himself realized that he liked it. He sincerely believed that studying and practical application of alchemy not only helped him grow and improve, but also allowed him to make a significant contribution to creating a bright future for all humanity. It does not matter what happened to alchemy during the 500 years he slept. The main thing is that people have always strived and will strive for a bright future because this desire is ingrained in us. That is why Vacant and the rest of the alchemists side by side conducted experiment after experiment, tirelessly seeking ways to make life better for everyone around. The alchemist remembered the faces of his comrades, who proudly learned new things with him and grew together, overcoming all difficulties on their path. Closing his eyes and sharply crossing his arms in front of his face, a clap sounded throughout the room, and the hero prepared for the final step. Shouting the command, "Create," he opened his eyes and released streams of light around the room, which seemed to fly chaotically, but in a moment they merged into one bright and sparkling star that shone. The light went out and the alchemist was already holding the spiritual potion of Arunia in his hands. It alleviates the symptoms of poisoning from the elixir and initiates the body's recovery process. Having received the order to administer the healing elixir, Zosmos began to absorb the potion from the open jar like a sponge. After that, he flew up to the patient and began circling above him, dropping the contents directly onto the bed. The medicine fell on the innkeeper like some kind of magical powder, sparkling and reflecting the sun, and the skin on his face instantly cleared, gaining a healthier color. Zosmos finished his work and reported that the body would recover in a couple of hours. It was clear that the medicine had worked, and a barely noticeable, calm smile appeared on the man's face. Vacant returned to the girl and gently assured her. Now everything would definitely be fine with her father, but the girl did not share his joy. She was confused and did not understand what had happened at all. The alchemist, satisfied with his work, smiled. This medicine would greatly weaken the man, but he would feel better, so it was worth giving him another 2 or 3 days to rest. Taking advantage of the opportunity for his own benefit, the boy asked to stay in the tavern for a short time to observe the patient's condition. The assistant was worried that the girl might tell someone about the strange flying cube, since no one here really knows about artificial beings, but it seemed that Fiora did not even understand what it was. The young waitress cried with happiness. A warm and sincere smile appeared on her face, and she did not even know how to thank them. Vacant looked at her and smiled warmly in response. Because he was simply doing what he considered his calling as an alchemist, it was his path and his duty to the people. The girl's eyes instantly widened in surprise. She clearly imagined alchemists quite differently. A few days later, while Vacant was eating, he sighed heavily, pressed the fork to his mouth, and, as if confessing, began to talk about his powers. Apparently, he had not yet fully returned to normal and part of his power had disappeared somewhere. Zosmos confirmed the master's reasoning. His characteristics had indeed clearly changed. Magical and intellectual abilities had decreased, and his psychological age had also shortened, so he should be careful. The sad alchemist resigned himself to the fact that he had become weaker and that he would have to live with it, but suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by an elbow strike to the back. A lively and cheerful innkeeper named Edgar, holding a huge piece of juicy meat with a smile on his face and sincere care in his eyes, generously persuaded the boy at the table to eat more, because he was his debtor. Vacant awkwardly tried to refuse. He was already full, but Edgar insisted that a young body needed to eat a lot, and apparently the tavern was so tasty that the boy gained about 5 kilograms. The owner of the dancing duck patted him on the shoulder and assured him that everything was free for him, but the alchemist cautiously stepped back and said he still wanted to pay. Edgar asked if Vacant was going to join the Adventurers Guild. After all, it was the easiest way for a traveler to earn money, but the boy only looked at him in surprise. Adventurers, who are they? The tavern owner pointed with his finger at the tall building outside the window, said that was the guild, and advised at least to register there just in case. Archives say that adventurers are the closest to alchemists at this time. Probably they also earn by all possible means. Filled with determination, the legendary alchemist who had slept for 500 years headed to the majestic building, and the grateful Ophi Anta only waved her hand to him. The alchemist approached the bridge leading to the guild entrance. Flags fluttered on the building, and the guild itself had a watchtower and a neat facade. Alchemy was no longer what it used to be, and now a new threat was brewing. The first-generation alchemist could hardly believe his eyes. He had slept through 521 years and found himself surrounded by a noisy crowd of rough men in heavy armor. Their armor only emphasized their impressive physical strength. He always tried to live peacefully and not provoke anyone, but as soon as he stepped over the guild threshold, he immediately found himself surrounded by men who openly despised and were aggressive towards him. Confused and stunned, he only raised his hands in a gesture of apology and, trying to understand the situation, explained what was wrong with him and why he caused such a reaction. Just an hour ago, the boy confidently and decisively crossed the bridge leading straight to the guild and impatiently awaited what awaited him beyond these gates. He was looking at it with admiration from the inside, and Zosmos, unable to resist curiosity, also flew out to look around. Beautiful chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The building itself had at least 2 floors, and on the first floor there were rows of tables and benches. The hall seemed to be filled with various people. The adventurers immersed themselves in an atmosphere of joy. They drank, ate, and chatted cheerfully. Drinks spilled on the floor, pieces of food flew in all directions, but no one cared. Vaken was clearly waiting with impatience and lively curiosity for the wonders of this place, but his thoughts were suddenly interrupted. Someone called him. A stern warrior pointed a finger at the hero and said that this place was not for people like him, not for small children. Of course, this was to be expected, as the one addressing him was the veteran adventurer Beowulf himself. Without losing his joy, Bacon told how he came from a distant land and was told to look for work here. Beowulf was not satisfied with this answer, smiled, and asked if that was exactly why he wanted to become an adventurer. The boy, without losing his kind smile, continued to look intently at the stern warrior. His face was twisted with embarrassment and anger, making him even more threatening. The warrior, without thinking long, suddenly turned around, poked his finger towards the reception, and gestured for the boy to follow him. The other adventurers laughed. Beowulf was once again babysitting the newcomer, and apparently he really enjoyed it. Completely ignoring the laughter, the veteran called Shirley to register the newcomer. The sweet girl clapped her hands with joy upon meeting Beowulf and the newbie. Her name is Shirley. She is the administrator of the Adventurers Guild. Shirley suggested that Var join them, but he refused. He intended to be an adventurer all his life, and placing a heavy hand on Waken's shoulder, said that he himself would become one. The administrator greeted the newcomer, who had just joined their well-known Adventurers Guild, with a warm and sincere smile. The alchemist awkwardly scratched his head and admitted that he had no idea who the adventurers were and what they did. Realizing that the matter needed clarification, the alchemist asked to be told in more detail. Shirley and Beowulf exchanged silent glances, and at that moment it became clear his questions were inappropriate and caused concern. Several of Vaken's new acquaintances were petrified with horror. The veteran, trembling, pointed a finger at the alchemist and feverishly asked how he could come here knowing nothing about adventurers, while the first-generation alchemist clumsily justified himself, saying he was from a very remote region. While Beowulf was guessing where that boy was from a tribe or the jungle, the administrator gathered her thoughts and deliberately cleared her throat to draw attention. She decisively decided to explain everything. Adventurers are people who take on various tasks from the guild. They decide for themselves which quests to complete and receive rewards for them, the girl explained. Now everything became clear. They were simply jack-of-all-trades in the era of voids, and this was done by alchemists. While the boy was digesting the received information, Beowulf pointed to the task he was about to complete and advised the newcomer to watch carefully and learn to better understand. Bo chose the task of hunting a large and dangerous beast that was raging, and the announcement with its photo truly caused terror. Vaken began to read. The beast frightened the locals and hunted in the western forest, but he did not manage to finish reading about the reward. The traveler had already gathered a team for the mission and, without blinking, assured the newcomer, "You don't even need to count your reward. Everything will go to Beowulf and his team, and then they will go have fun." The alchemist was quite surprised. He did not think that a whole group was going on a mission, but after some thought decided to simply choose another. Shirley decided to clarify what class Vaken was, a mage or a warrior. Confident and enthusiastic boy loudly exclaimed that he was Vaken Ord, a great alchemist. Shirley looked at him in surprise, and the crowd of adventurers froze in silence with obvious contempt. A depressing atmosphere hung in the air. While the adventurers sighed with irritation, Vakin did not understand at all what was happening and what caused such a strong reaction. The administrator awkwardly pulled out 3 announcements and said that these were all the tasks for alchemists. The crowd began to laugh hollowly, and he still could not understand. How come? Why are there so few of them? The more they talked, the more disappointed the alchemist became. Short-sighted adventurers discussed who even currently practiced alchemy, and that boy, of course, would not understand, probably because he was from distant lands. No one ever explained why the work of alchemists is underestimated, and I was afraid to ask. I did not want to look like a fool for nothing. Having gone through the announcements, Vakin confidently handed Shirley one sheet. He decided to take this order. The administrator sternly warned him that fulfilling the order for a potion that should ease healing would be very difficult, but immediately added that the newcomer has a whole week to figure out all the nuances. Suddenly, Vakin found himself surrounded by adventurers from all sides. Someone even threw an arm over his shoulder, and the whole crowd was laughing and mocking him, begging him to complete the task they considered a futile help. The alchemist, completely puzzled, asked why they said that, and the crowd just burst into loud laughter at how stupid this guy was. 2 mages drew attention to themselves by showing magical abilities and with confident faces declared that now everything is decided by magic and miracles, and mages and clerics are the best support classes. Finishing their speeches and boasting, they added that they did not expect much from the novice. The main thing was that he brewed useful potions and gave them to them. That was the maximum he was capable of. Completely confused, Bacon decided to ask if magic and miracles really were based only on the use of magical and divine power, to which Ken received an affirmative answer. At that time, alchemists believed that problems could only be solved here and now and only temporarily. They did not use universal potions that could be prepared anytime. When everything finally came together, it ignited the hero. That was why adventurers grouped together alone. They had too many weak spots and vulnerabilities. But the crowd was by no means pleased with these words. The boy was surrounded from all sides, and in the end, he was practically pressed against the wall, powerless to break out of this circle. The enraged warriors shouted so loudly that the whole house and surroundings echoed. How could the alchemist say such a thing? It seemed Vacant should have kept his thoughts to himself. But the crowd of angry adventurers did not quiet down. They continued shouting that the skills of alchemists were nothing compared to magic and miracles, so those guys should quietly brew potions and play with little stones. Vakinord was terribly disappointed that alchemy could have declined so much in the 500 years he was absent. He remembered a merchant he met on the street a few days ago. He was selling low-quality healing potions. That was the norm now, and it seemed that alchemists were in the worst possible position. Hopes were shattered against harsh reality because the hero was convinced that alchemy would rise to unprecedented heights and reveal to people many hidden secrets that could change the world. The boy sharply turned around and with a serious look headed towards the administrator amid the cries and outrage of the crowd. Placing a box of healing potions on the counter, he asked where to hand them over, and the noisy crowd, which a moment ago was loudly scolding him and was clearly dissatisfied, was now completely puzzled. Shirley asked in surprise where so many potions came from. The alchemist supposedly was only taking orders, but it turned out he had his own secrets. A whole chest was prepared in advance. The adventurers were still in shock. They could not believe it because brewing potions is extremely difficult. One adventurer snatched a bottle from Vakin's hands and shouted that it was just soda water in a bottle. The alchemist did not resist at all. He was confident in his product. The man began to examine the bottle and froze. The elixir inside had incredible beauty and caught the eye with its bright color and shine. Carefully examining the contents, he confidently said that this potion was most likely useless. However, amid the loud, cheerful laughter of the self-confident crowd around, he bravely and greedily began to swallow this strange potion. The next moment, his face contorted with shock. He felt a surge of strength, clear, powerful, covering the body as if energy was trying to burst out in a turbulent stream. Medicine worked so amazingly that the finger the warrior had lost long ago grew back again, as if nothing had happened. The warrior trembled, examining his hands. He could not understand whether it was a dream or reality. After all, he had never encountered such a potion before. He rushed to the alchemist, eagerly wanting to know how he had prepared such a potion. Vakin, looking at him in surprise, only asked one question that made him think, wouldn't it have been better if the finger had not grown back? The traveler shook his head. He bit his lip, trying to hold back tears of joy, but they treacherously continued to flow down his cheeks. He cried like a child and rushed to embrace the emptiness. It turned out that this man was once a hunter. When he lost a finger, he had to change class, but now he can use a bow again. Other adventurers froze listening to the conversation between that traveler and the novice, and he showered gratitude, calling this healing potion special and assuring that it can cure any ailment. A deadly silence fell around, enveloping the room like thick fog. All adventurers froze, unable to utter a word. No one expected this. All adventurers, as if on command, turned around and instantly rushed to the administrative desk, pushing each other and raising dust clouds from the floor. When the crowd calmed down a bit, Shirley shyly called vacant. Requests for healing potions increased significantly. Shirley placed a stack of papers on the table. Vacant sighed heavily. This, of course, was not what he desired, but maybe it would be even better this way. Although the number of orders frightened him, the crowd started murmuring again, attracting alchemists' attention. What happened there? Previously aggressive men rubbed their hands greedily, anticipating drinking the potion ordered from the alchemist. Their eyes sparkled as if they were ready to pounce on that boy at any moment. Everything was written on their faces. Zosimus could not understand how everything could turn out this way. Bakenord proudly raised his head and thought, "This is my chance time to show real alchemical skills." After some time, he wiped sweat from his face and placed another box of elixirs on the table, seemingly the last one. Surprisingly, Bacon again dealt with all those standing behind too quickly. Heavy footsteps slammed near the entrance. They could not be missed, and everyone raised their heads. Someone was slowly but inevitably walking to the guild door with firm determination, and all present instantly turned their gaze to the entrance, full of expectation. It was the wounded Beowulf. All his armor, hands, and even his head were covered in blood, and he clenched his teeth to hold back the pain. Worried and anxious, Bacon, seeing B.O. in such a state, immediately asked what exactly had happened in the war that brought him to such a terrible situation. The alchemist looked at Beowulf in surprise. When he collapsed into the guild, every movement screamed fatigue. He was covered in blood and carried a heavy sword on his back. The novice stood puzzled. What had happened to the experienced adventurer? He could not even imagine how it could have happened. The man, impressed with his courage, although they had to flee from a beast that turned out to be much stronger than they thought, he was already preparing to return to battle after a short rest to rescue his comrades. Vaken pulled out one of the healing bottles that he was handing out to everyone in the guild today and handed it to Beowulf. Pleased with himself, the newly minted adventurer admitted that he had prepared the potion himself, and the warrior decisively drank it, thinking that it certainly could not get any worse. But the effect of this potion amazed him much more than he had imagined. At that moment, he felt an instant and powerful surge of strength and energy that filled his entire body. His wounds completely healed, as if the battle he had desperately fled from had never happened, and he looked with surprise at the places where blood had been flowing just a minute ago. When Beowulf turned around to find out how the alchemist had managed it, the novice was already surrounded by an admiring crowd, and when everyone started applauding, he felt a little awkward and embarrassed by such close attention. The warrior still did not quite understand what had happened, but he was happy. Vaken found himself at the center of attention, and his potion really healed the wounds and restored the strength lost in battle. He was going to return and help his comrades, but the alchemist stopped him. With a persistent expression on his face, he handed over several bottles, insisting that he take them with him and assuring that they would be very useful. The veteran accepted the help, waved his hand, and left, promising that when he returned they would drink together in honor of the victory. Zosimos expressed hope that the warrior would cope with the monster. The assistant also reported about the found traces of the Tower of the Sage precisely in the direction of the Western Forest, where battles with monsters are currently taking place. Vaken Orid was filled with inspiration. This is great news. The Tower of the Sage can be used as a home and at the same time keep his alchemical materials and tools there. When the boy was already confidently stepping towards the exit from the guild, Shirley stopped him and assured the alchemist that he would not go anywhere. It was absolutely clear Shirley was determined. She asked the frightened Vacant if he had read the guild's license agreement, which he had recently joined. Hearing the refusal, the administrator sighed and decided that it was time to explain in detail to the newly minted adventurer the main rules that apply here. The guild has a ranking system from 10, the lowest, to 1, the highest. Tasks are issued exclusively by rank, and they can only be taken strictly according to one's current rank so that everyone receives tasks according to their skills and experience. Vaken was clearly upset when he found out that he started at rank 10 and therefore could not go hunting dangerous monsters with Beowulf's team. Shirley, however, was sure that the alchemist had no place on the front line. The administrator laid out a stack of orders before him and said, "Take any from this stack, but nothing else." The girl smiled, took off the top sheet of paper, and showing that she was interested, tried to attract the newcomer's attention. When Shirley realized it was in vain, she carefully approached him from behind, lightly poked him in the shoulder and whispered in his ear that, drinking from him, who knows, maybe she would even fall in love. Obviously not expecting such pressure, the boy instantly rushed to the exit, fleeing from threats and leaving behind a smiling girl. And while Shirley, pleased with herself, smiled slyly and wondered if she had overdone it, Vakin had already rushed into the western forest. Despite all her efforts to convince the alchemist, the girl's words had no desired effect, and the boy eventually, without any hesitation, went into the very heart of the forest where the battle was taking place. What other doubts could there be? After all, if there were any alchemical materials here, Bacon simply had no right to stand aside. He could not miss such an opportunity. Zosim finally figured out his teacher hinting that he was running away from Shirley. Funny, because he was already over 40 and the girl was still not there, he justifies that for a true researcher women are secondary. The reasoning was interrupted when the alchemist stepped onto the battlefield. The warriors were desperately fighting evil monsters, although there were many more of them. Bacon looked around carefully, trying to understand how critical and complicated this situation was. It seemed that everything was truly catastrophic. Beowulf was holding back the monster with all his strength, and his comrades could no longer stand on their feet. From behind the trees appeared the most powerful enemy, the great MANGABOSS, Lesser Tarrasque. When he opened his jaws and gave a deafening roar, he was simply huge, and his incredibly sharp teeth gleamed threateningly. Zosimus reviewed the archives and with excitement reported that this was a new species. Vakin quickly realized that the material that could be extracted from it would also be new. Beowulf noticed the alchemist and began to scold him. Why did he even come here? There is no place for novices here. The monster is too strong. The alchemist was so deep in thought that he stopped noticing the world around him. His face became calm, but a sinister grimace raged on it, making him gloomy and mysterious. Beowulf tried to stop that boy, but it was already too late. Vakin only muttered to himself about materials, about how many new things he would be able to get. The next moment he was already ready for battle. The openings of his storage opened again, and 4 shiny stones popped out from there. Where will alchemists start looking for the monster's weak spot? The stones that the boy clenched in his palms had a special nature and meaning. They were not just ordinary pebbles, but unique artifacts embodying the 4 main elements. Bacon did not waste time on thoughts and doubts. He instantly decided that the best was to give up everything at once. While Beowulf's team watched with mouths agape in astonishment at what was happening, the alchemist threw all 4 stones at the monsters with all his might. Some burned alive in flames and could not extinguish the fire, others froze in blocks of ice, some were lifted by the wind like a tornado and thunderously thrown back to the ground, and a few were unlucky. They were struck by lightning. The adventurers were confused. What was this at all? This was not even magic, but the action of objects. Probably they had never encountered such power before. Vakin did not even think about stopping. He continued throwing stones, from which Beowulf and his team barely managed to dodge. Only when the clearing was strewn with the corpses of fallen monsters did the alchemist finally stop, and the roar of pain that had sounded earlier slowly subsided, dissolving into the air. The boy did not even have time to understand the weakness of these monsters. They turned out to be too fragile, but the amazement still did not leave the faces of the adventurers. Chuckling, the satisfied alchemist decided that fire was indeed the most effective, and did not even notice how frightening he looked at that moment, completely immersed in thought and contemplative admiration. But now the warriors were gripped by true horror at his presence. He really seemed unexpectedly terrifying to them. Vakin turned his head still with the same terrifying grimace, and directed his gaze at the last monster that survived after his elemental stones. He stood face to face with the huge, loudly roaring beast without a trace of fear and not flinching from its piercing roar, as if it was already throwing him a real challenge, ready for battle. Circles appeared on the floor, streams of light burst out from them and surrounded the alchemist. What was the weakness of this monster? How to attack it? The boy was about to find out all this. From the circles, along with flashes of light, magical swords of all elements began to emerge, and Vakin grew serious. He was clearly interested in what this huge monster was capable of. The next moment the boy pulled out a magical device and reliable weapon from the stash, the alchemist's staff. Having pulled it out, he immediately swung it and ordered himself to start. All the swords he had summoned instantly pointed their tips at the monster, ready to deliver the decisive blow. The next moment they simultaneously rushed in the same direction at the speed of light. Dozens of swords instantly rained down on the small Tarrasque. The monster only helplessly growled in pain. But the monster turned out to be no ordinary one. It still confidently stood on its feet, suddenly surprising not only the alchemist, who expected much more from his actions, but also the entire team of adventurers watching this with amazement and shock. With one sharp jerk, Vacant cut off the head of that monster, the leader of this group and the last one remaining. The giant body and head fell to the ground with a terrible crash, soaking it with flowing blood. The monster was definitely defeated. Travelers sat with their mouths agape, watching everything that was happening. How could this alchemist do all this, and at such a young age? And the most terrible thing about all this was that the first generation of alchemists 500 years ago went out themselves for materials, and did not just sit in laboratories over potions. And this monster became just another victim of one of the most dangerous alchemists, Vacan Horde. A smile did not leave his face as, armed with a sharp knife, he carefully and greedily carved out the valuable and rare material needed for his dangerous experiments. Soon Bacon found himself in the tavern dancing duck. Suddenly a bag of coins slammed on the table. The coins scattered across the table and clattered even louder. The alchemist lifted his eyes from his work and asked Beowulf which money he had poured out. He received the answer. It was part of the reward for killing the lesser Tarrasque, although the boy only had materials he had collected. The traveler shook his head. Sharing the deserved reward was one of the main rules of adventurers, so he was not going to back down. The warrior even made a deal with the administrator, saying that Vacant was a temporary participant, although this was not his task at all. Stopping his objections, the boy took the money and decided to invest it in opening a laboratory. While the boy was thanking Beowulf for the funding, he became interested in what the alchemist was brewing, and the latter was so delighted by this question that he decided to immediately show his creation. Bacon was inventing a stove that did not require firewood, and proudly showed his invention: 40 temperature modes, a fire protection system, and a heat-saving function. Beowulf was already about to brush off the intrusive stories about that boy who just wanted to leave the embodiment of alchemist's wisdom in this tavern, when suddenly Theo entered. What an empty cauldron. The girl smiled happily and pressed her hands to her chest, as if overwhelmed with joy when she saw this amazing invention. Seeing such a reaction, the alchemist raised his hands to the stove and offered the girl to use his invention, expecting that she would instantly throw herself into his arms with gratitude. It seems Vacant miscalculated somewhere, because this joy was directed not at him and not at his creation, but at Beowulf. The girl approached him and asked what he was doing here. The alchemist's disappointment was indescribable. The waitress, to the boy's disappointment, did not leave Beowulf and invited him to come in and have a snack at the tavern, and Vacant, puzzled, asked how Theo knew Beowulf. The boy froze in amazement when the girl said that he was the strongest adventurer in this city, and that was why everyone knew him. The alchemist found himself in such an unexpected situation that he was completely confused. Not hiding his displeasure, he puffed out his cheeks and muttered something incomprehensible about Beowulf's popularity. Not much was being said about Beowulf now. The city was more interested in the mysterious alchemist of incredible power, whose potions healed everything. A little later, Beowulf and the Viking headed to the Sullivan Adventurers Guild. Suddenly, as soon as they approached the entrance, a crowd rushed at them. Everyone begged the alchemist to join their groups and were even ready to fight for the right to take him into their team and use his abilities for their own purposes. All because rumors about the great alchemist, the master of unparalleled knowledge and talents, spread like wildfire, and although dozens of offers poured in, he rejected them all. He passionately and decisively sought to open his own laboratory to implement his ideas and projects, and was ready to accept anyone who wanted to help him with this. Beowulf sharply helped the boy disperse the restless crowd and sent everyone to Shirley's table. Warriors and mages rushed to leave their requests at the reception desk. But it turned out that he was doing this not with the best intentions. The traveler carefully took out the order and invited Vacant to join their team for this mission. Beowulf made the most pleading facial expression, hoping it would persuade Ken, but obviously his efforts had little effect. Ken remained indifferent. But this offer did not say that the alchemist had to join the ranks of the Black Dogs. That was the name of the veterans group. Just as the warrior was enthusiastically explaining the essence of the task, an important escort mission that was to become incredibly tense, he was suddenly interrupted by someone who had just entered the guild. The one who dared to do this was Vive, a mage of the Black Dog, and at first glance it was clear that he had no intention of participating in the mission with the alchemist, especially such a young one. Vivek proudly said that if he had been alongside the black dogs when they fought the monsters, they would have handled them themselves, and the help of a child would have been only a burden to them. Approaching Vaken, the mage looked at him so aggressively, as if he wanted to break through the enemy's defense with his gaze, and Vivek, clearly showing his attitude, sharply and loudly ordered the alchemist to go away. The commander of the black dog tried to calm his mage, but he did not even want to listen. He just shouted that he was tired of babysitting stupid and incompetent adventurers. Vivek considered alchemists the biggest parasites in this world, so he waved his magic wand and threw a whirlwind towards Vaken. Fortunately, the boy reacted lightning fast and managed to dodge. And while everyone was trying to calm the mage who was destroying everything in the guild, that boy was only wondering why alchemists were so hated in this world. It always upset him terribly. And yet Vaken suggested to Vivek to talk and figure everything out, although he himself had already destroyed half of the guild. The mage did not want to listen to the alchemist, and he, like hundreds of other alchemists, could not take responsibility for the mirror space. Mirror space is a fascinating idea that implies the existence of a world absolutely identical to our real one. Once alchemists conducted large-scale experiments in such worlds because their complex and often super-powerful weapons sometimes simply could not be tested in the real world. And finally, Beowulf lifted the veil of secrecy and explained why Vivek got so angry. His older sister was forever trapped in the mirror space due to an unfortunate accident. The mage confirmed the words of his commander. When she only slightly became interested in the Academy of Magic, she was taken away and immediately began to be tested with an artifact called the Darby Mirror. It seems this artifact was discarded about 500 years ago. How did it end up in our days again? Vavia's anger only grew. His sister would never return and would remain there forever, but no alchemist dared to take on this responsibility. The wizard was already suffocating, but he did not even think of stopping. He swung again into the void as if to strike, and kept insisting that he wanted to get rid of every alchemist. The boy simply grabbed his hand firmly, trying to hold it to avoid further blows. Vaken, although Vavi literally radiated burning passions and rage, remained amazingly calm and even smiled at Vavi, who was boiling with anger. The alchemist decided he definitely must help him. This angered Manga even more. What could this boy do? Vavi had given his whole life to become a mage and find his sister, only to learn that for this he needed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli. Travelers had only heard of such an invention in fairy tales, so Vivek completely despaired. He realized that his little sister would stay there forever. If only he had that spell, he would definitely be able to bring back his older sister. The mage, overwhelmed with pain and despair, could no longer hold back his tears. He grabbed his head, feeling his heart break. While the other adventurers sympathized with their comrade, Bacon was probably plotting something. Slyly smiling, he put his hand in his pocket. It was from there that he pulled out the sacred bell of Fulcanelli and, smiling, handed it to Vava. It seemed like mockery, not a funny joke. The wizard had searched so long for a way to save his sister, and the boy did it so easily. Just took out a bell from his pocket that does not exist in this world at all. The alchemist explained that it was indeed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli, but Vavi, together with the commander of the Black Dogs, only became angry at what they heard. They perceived it as a cruel mockery, unacceptable in their serious situation. Then Viking also pulled out a mirror, wanted to show it. To pull out those who got stuck and rescue during accidents, the sacred bell of Fulcanelli was created. When the theory of the mirror space was first put forward, they started making a bunch of different artifacts. They glitched, and because of this, accidents happened. Vaken exhaled deeply as he prepared to use this mysterious artifact. Inside him, irritation and disappointment were growing. Everything happening around clearly upset him a lot. In his time, this spell was cast on every corner, but the Royal Academy, one of the most prestigious universities, is shocking. How can it not cope with such a seemingly simple problem? He dived even deeper into thoughts, continuing to search for the girl in the mirror space using the bell, and he was haunted by an obsessive thought whether alchemy could be revived in this world. The alchemist found her, pulled her into this world, and the room filled with bright, blinding light from the mirror. He jerked his hand sharply, trying with all his might to pull the girl into this world. In the bright light, the figure of the girl slowly began to emerge, as if she was swimming out of the mirror, illuminated by an incredible and majestic glow. When the girl fully flew into this world, the mirror shattered into small sharp shards which with a loud crack flew around the room, sparkling with sparks and adding even more mystery to everything. There was a barely noticeable blush on the girl's face, and she seemed to be sound asleep. A light breeze, raised by the mirror shards flying in all directions, slightly tousled her hair. No one in the room expected this, only Vacant smiled confidently. He did it again. The girl fell right onto her savior, but fortunately he caught her. He was ready for this and managed to save her from injuries and the consequences of the fall. Vacant explained to Sopping Vava that although he saved his sister by finding her in the mirror world, she is now very weak and needs a week of rest, after which she will be able to live as before. He handed the girl to his weeping brother. He could not believe that all this was really happening to him. He had long given up and was fixated only on revenge against everyone he considered guilty. Vave could not hold back his feelings and kept crying. He was overwhelmed with such joy because he finally met his dear, beloved older sister, whom he had not seen for so long. The adventurers watching from the side were both touched and stunned by what was happening. What else could they do? How would he surprise them next time? The wizard, feeling the full weight of his actions, fell to his knees and begged forgiveness for his disdain towards the young alchemist. Although he was over 40, he showered gratitude and apologies. Bacon was satisfied with the completed work and only smiled sympathetically at Vave. Suddenly Beowulf interrupted this very touching conversation and announced that they would set out on the mission he had mentioned earlier tomorrow. A little later, tired after a hard day, the travelers rested at the Dancing Duck, and Fio was clearly dissatisfied. She puffed out her cheeks in a childish, capricious gesture and looked blankly and offended, as if expecting him to react to her displeasure. Ken strained to explain that Beo had forced him to go with them, but the girl just snorted and turned away. How could he deceive her? He had promised to go to the party with her tomorrow. One of the travelers watching this scene burst out laughing. He had never seen Fio like that. It seemed she really liked the alchemist. The girl bit her lip in embarrassment, but when Zosimo suggested leaving, she could not stand it. The next morning, the travelers stood on the street. They had finished all preparations and were ready to start the task. But at that moment, the idyll was interrupted by the shout of a man in glasses, a scientist from the Royal Academy of Gizara. He loudly expressed dissatisfaction and outrage that an alchemist was participating in the expedition. In his opinion, this was completely unacceptable. While Vacant awkwardly scratched his head, Beo persistently convinced the experienced scientist that the decision to take the alchemist with them would be very successful, and that in the future he would not regret his choice. Jezar, clenching his teeth in rage and offense, growled, decisively making it clear that he should not be considered a foolish, naive child, and stated that alchemists are merely vulgar pseudo-competitors of real scientists. Captain Chirpaniksov firmly assured that they would not leave without this boy, and in that case the scientist could set off alone without their escort. Zosimos carefully touched his master's head. He wanted to warn him about the ominous premonition that this mission would be dangerous, but that was exactly why Ken agreed to go with Beo's team. It was a mission to escort Professor Jezar to the ossuary tower, standing in ruins near the basin of the Dunatek River. After the rainy season, monsters swarm around the destination. The conditions were too unsuitable for research by a group of civilians, but after the rainy season the area abounds with plants and seafood, so the civilian thought he might find something useful there. He personally tried to convince the scientist that there was no reason to worry, and persistently assured that in the future he would not interfere with his important research. Gazar waved his hand irritably to him. It was so obvious that it was not even worth mentioning. No alchemist could interfere with his noble research. The displeased scientist reminded him, time is money, time to get to work, and headed to the cart. The alchemist sighed with relief, and Beyav, patting him on the shoulder, followed Gazar. Finally, the long-awaited journey began, and the small group set off with eager enthusiasm, but so far they had only covered a small part of the planned route. Ken was talking with his assistant. They had not ridden in a cart for a long time because they often used fast teleportation, and sometimes it was really worth just relaxing and enjoying such a ride. Suddenly, Oscar, a member of the Black Dogs, jumped out of the cart and greeted Wayne with a joyful smile, hoping they could work together and establish fruitful cooperation. He decided to ask Ken if he minded a simple, casual form of address. After all, they were both from the same guild, which meant they were friends and comrades. Oscar's sister, Miss Cal, sternly warned her brother, "Don't relax, we're at work." But Vavai, on the contrary, advised the alchemist to relax a bit because he was with the Black Dogs. And Miss Cal was indeed right. Zosmos shouted to the master that a group was approaching from the right side of the road, and Ken instantly informed the Black Dogs, but they did not even deviate from their path. In just a few minutes, the carriage was surrounded on all sides by armed bandits who acted swiftly and cohesively. Their demand was quite usual for people of their world who lived like them. They were looking for something truly valuable and meaningful, while threatening to instantly kill everyone in the carriage without exception. The scholar, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, quickly hid behind the backs of the brave travelers, who were clearly displeased and outraged by this unexpected encounter. The bandits, filled with malicious delight, cackled and laughed, while the squad of black dogs quickly jumped out of the cart and immediately lined up, ready to repel any threat and protect Hazar. While the scientists panicked, Beale was already devising a battle tactic, turned to Vakin and suggested taking on two of them, but the alchemist was once again lost in his thoughts and completely ignored the others. That man stubbornly insisted that the robbers had not changed at all. Even after 500 years, they only knew how to rob and kill, and Ken stopped arguing and returned to Beowulf. With an absolutely empty gaze, Ken finally asked quietly, "Is it a crime to put someone to sleep forever?" While B.O. stood bewildered, the robbers, clearly confident, laughed and rushed to attack the adventurous. Indeed, whoever fears punishment should not even raise a weapon. With a sudden, completely unexpected strike, when no one expected any action from Vakin, without any hesitation he cut off the head of one of the bandits who was about to attack him. Blood splattered in all directions. The alchemist confidently said that he was not afraid of any punishment, he just wanted to know the true price of each of their lives. Bandits were caught in place as if their feet were rooted to the ground. Ken, feeling the tension rising, sighed heavily. It seems now he will have to deal with problems again. Pointing his staff at the bandits, he threatened them. It is best for them to pray now. If they do not want to die, let them fall to their knees and ask him for forgiveness 100 times. Gazar was in shock. He fell on his buttocks, his body trembling with fear, and he asked what was happening here. The main hero stood with a weapon in his hands, and around him lay dozens of fallen enemies. No one was breathing. Vakin, a little embarrassed, said that it seems he shocked the professor a bit. Then he asked how many people he needed to bring back to life. The man behind continued to tremble with fear. Zosim approached Vakin and said that it seems they can still be brought back to life, to which Vakin replied sadly that it was sad. According to the 30-minute rule, a person can be revived with secret potions, but it all depends on the condition of the body. Acquaintances said that he stood out again, but he was a good person. They did not even need him, so the main hero apologized to them and promised that next time he would choose a different way. After some time, their cart moved forward again. They rushed across the plains, and Gazar was still trembling with fear, biting his lower lip with his teeth. The hero apologized for overdoing it a bit, and he was told not to pay attention. Aristocrats are always cowards because they themselves do not lift a finger, only sit in chairs. At that moment, Zosim interrupted them, addressed Vakin, calling him Lord, and said that he had finished what he was asked to do. The main hero sincerely thanked him. The assistant smiled and said that he was too kind. At that moment, the enemies came to their senses. Zosimo said that they all had to come back to life. Moreover, he bit into their heads. He does not think they will follow the path of a bandit. They can tell him, do not say that. After all, they are people, and even if they made a mistake once, they can make a mistake a second time. The hero thought about how in his time people repeatedly started wars and killed each other with weapons created by alchemists. Even bandits had the weapons of alchemists. He was mistaken, naively thinking that this would not happen, and meanwhile just kept driving the cart. The hero plunged into deep thoughts. His face became sad, and he thought about how many times he had already been wrong. At the same time, the commander returned to the professor and asked if he understood why they took Vacant with them, to which he nodded. Immediately the boy said that there was still a long way ahead, so they needed to prepare. In the rainy season, there is a sea of water here. You can't go further by carriage, so they abandoned the cart and went on foot, and then they encountered a giant crab monster and all had to fight it. Behind the last enemy, a giant slime will lie in wait for them, and after it, huge water insects will appear. All of this looks very scary. As soon as night falls, a crowd of skeletons will crawl out. These monsters will surround them, and it will be difficult for them to fight. However, to achieve victory, the main hero will use his weapon. From it will burst a huge energy barrier, which with its power will destroy all enemies, and the professor will be shocked. At that moment, the man was asked again if he was glad they took the main hero with them. He was already angry and said that he already understood how cool he was, and another man added that the biggest problem was still ahead. It is foggy here because of the rainy season, so they decided to wait until it clears up. They decided to eat, and everyone immediately agreed. Gizar said that they spoke exactly like that. They needed to move faster. Did they really think he was just hurrying for no reason? To this, they replied that they were thinking about his safety. The man said that they were adventurers, so they had to come up with something. Another man stepped aside and noted that the professor seemed obsessed with his work. Bacon asked if the research was really that important, and they replied that he was kind of studying the history of magic. Bacon became interested. Soon they came across a new structure, a bone tower. Everyone rejoiced that they had finally reached it, and the main character at that moment had no doubt these were the ruins of the Tower of the Wise. The team turned to the professor and shouted that there might be monsters ahead and it was not worth rushing forward, then asked if he understood them, to which Gazar sharply replied, "What are you saying? I have no time." He had to quickly solve the mystery of this tower and secure a place for himself in the academy. After that, the man instantly ran to the structure. The others just thought about how much trouble he was causing. Bacon wondered why he couldn't keep up. He was told that this tower disappears immediately after the end of the rainy season and no one knows why. Vakin said he understood everything and thought to himself that perhaps some functions of the Tower of the Wise still worked. Is there really fog everywhere here? This is fog of bones. It completely fills the tower with bones instead of knowledge. The main character turned to Zosimo's and said he had started to act, to which he replied that he was beginning to restore the archive. Bacon thought these were the ruins of the former city on the water of Donate. Once art and tourism flourished here, and now only pitiful ruins remained, and indeed instead of houses there were broken walls and fallen columns. In a moment the hero felt some currents in the air. Zosimo's addressed him, and Vakin said he noticed it too. Then his assistant suggested retreating now. The main character said that Nushi lived here long ago. If he is still here now, even after 500 years, that is a real trouble. Vakin's gaze became very focused, but inside his heart was pounding with nerves looking at the monster before him. He thought it would not be easy. The main characters shouted to Bo that they needed to flee immediately. A huge monster was approaching. The men asked him if this was his premonition again. If Bacon was so scared, then it was definitely something dangerous, and the guy warned, as soon as they are noticed, there will be real trouble. They shouted to Oscar, and this colonel ordered them to retreat because they were about to withdraw. The professor began shouting that they were talking nonsense. Then one of the escorts asked him if he didn't understand what was important right now. Bale asked what was wrong with Gizar. The main character thought to himself that he was a researcher and could understand him. Zosimo sharply said there was no time and the monster would be here soon. At that moment the monster burst out of the ground again. Pieces of the surface flew in all directions. His acquaintances froze in horror. It was a giant monster, the donut deathworm. Everyone shouted that they had never seen such creatures. Someone exclaimed that they were incredibly disgusting. Next to the huge monster, small worms were crawling. Bacon said they were his children and warned to be careful. He also said that they are all terribly insatiable and fiercely evil. There are over 100 of them, so we need to retreat from the swamp and water right now. His friend asked doubtfully whether they would be able to cope with them at all. After that, he called the professor. The bald man said that Geyser ran away from the monsters to some ruined building that looked very dangerous, and everyone, shocked, immediately began asking him about it. Zosimo said that in battle it would be better for him to be beside them, but now he had fled in. That was bad. The main character agreed with him but thought to himself that he could not just leave him to Dihai's conscience would not allow it. Vakin clenched his fist and firmly said that he had no choice, and from behind a voice sounded, "You really have no choice, you are afraid." It turned out that it was his friend, the commander, who asked him if he was really ready to risk his life for a person who spits on the lives of his guards. He said they were leaving right now. To this, the main character replied that this guy is quite dry. Zosmos added that it is indeed a wise decision for the commander. Vakin promised that he would try to do everything himself. The main character shouted to the others, "Run to the Tower of the Ossuary because he is going to use dangerous artifacts," and everyone froze at these words. In the palms of the main character, a tiny magical seal suddenly appeared, and he seriously said that he would figure out what to do with this creature. The commander asked what he was going to do alone. Another man agreed and said it was impossible, but Vakin again asked, "Listen to my request." Acquaintances told him not to dare to die. If it gets too hot, run away, while they themselves cleared their path, destroying the worm's children. Zosimo said that Bayo decided to clear a path for his retreat. It seems they had already become comrades. The main character agreed and said that was indeed the case. After that, Vakin turned his attention to the monster, shouted to it that he would become its opponent, took out an artifact, handheld explosive rockets, and rushed into attack. Almost immediately he threw this artifact directly at the enemy and shouted to him, "Catch." The hit struck the target. He shouted that he hit. The boy was wildly happy, but then something completely unexpected happened. The worm began to suck air into its mouth, then fiercely attacked him. He did not expect this, so he swore loudly. The beam was directed straight at his side. The commander and other crew members began shouting his name. No one knew what had happened to him, and through the smoke only the silhouette of the Viking was visible. After a few moments, the smoke cleared, as if the hero had removed a semi-transparent fabric. It turned out to be the silks of Fania, a very thin magical material that hardens upon impact. Vaken said he had little of it, so he would have to be careful, but then he decided to act differently and drank the hero's potion, which significantly enhances physical abilities. After that, he threw away the bottle with the elixir without even looking back. He looked determined and said the fight was beginning. The main character began circling around the monster. He was insanely fast, and the worm again tried to attack him with a beam, but the boy managed to dodge. And it turned out, Bacon decided to use his trick. The worm's body exploded. Acquaintances exclaimed excitedly that it was incredible and now understood why he asked to step back, and the professor asked if it was the alchemist's power. The hero thought that the defense was strong. The blows barely penetrated. If he hadn't had to finish the fight, maybe it would have worked out that way, but would he really have to use it? Then Zosimo's asked how he could help, and Vaken replied that the most important thing was not to let weaklings get close. The assistant said he understood. At that moment, his cubic body caught fire, rays scattered to the sides, and dealt with the worm's offspring. Many enemies were knocked down. Vaken asked when Zosimo's managed to learn magic. Then he added that thanks to him, he managed to complete his training. He had something special for him. A small dark sphere began to appear in his hands. Continuing to hold it, he stepped away from the spikes that the worm released towards him, but one of them still scratched his face. The main hero quietly boiled with rage. Suddenly he threw the sphere towards the worm. After that, he said that everything was ready. Vaken himself did not close his eyes for a minute, then everything around was in smoke. In a moment the smoke cleared, and it turned out that everything around, even the monster itself, was frozen in ice. These were ice droplets, and the artifact, thanks to the movement of surrounding molecules, creates absolute zero. Everyone began to ask what it was and how everything turned upside down in an instant. Zosimo's said that he had to use many artifacts, and he did not think that Vaken would have to use ice droplets. The main hero closed his eyes, drew his weapon, and said that nothing could be done anymore. The enemy was serious. However, they managed without any human losses. Vaken sharply threw the staff directly at the worm. The staff hit its body, and it crumbled into small pieces. All the men froze in shock. The broken worm began to fall to the ground in pieces, crumbling even more, while the main hero stood amidst these fragments. Wakana had a wide red smile. In his hands he clenched a magic stone and said that the one they would get from the worm could be worth much more than this. It burned with the desire to create, and as if the whole world at that moment was painted in bright colors. The professor addressed him by name. The hero turned around and joyfully exclaimed that he was alive, to which the man replied that alchemists are indeed capable of such things. Bacon replied that this was not a competition about who is better but who is worse. Alchemists are also capable of a lot. The professor smiled and happily said that he had opened his eyes, after which he thanked him for it. The others were shocked by his words. It was unexpected. Gazar looked at the frozen sculptures and said that the demonic King Talos, who mastered all the deep secrets of magic, never thought he would be able to see this. The hero felt a name surface, seemingly unknown but strangely familiar. He just did not remember it because it was 500 years ago. Bio turned to Bacon and asked, "What will they do now?" Bacon replied confusedly, "What are you even talking about?" and immediately added, "And what about the report for the guild?" The main hero said that everything was very bad and mentally agreed Beowulf was absolutely right. A monster appeared that no one had ever seen, and the alchemist immediately defeated it. Bacon thought, as soon as they find out about this, he will probably receive a summons to appear in the royal capital. A new day came, the fights ended, they returned to the city. Someone called the main hero and asked if he had a minute, and he immediately turned around. The boy in the cloak said that lately they hear about Vacant from everywhere, to which another confusedly stammered and asked who he was, and the boy asked again. Then he, with a barely noticeable smile, said that his name was Tarask. He, unlike him, was a simple alchemist. The protagonist recalled his previous encounters with this boy. Then he said that he had just eaten moose, the simplest, cheapest ingredients one could find. These memories made him feel awkward. Vakin said that he got the job thanks to him, so he sincerely thanked him for that time, and then Tarask added that now everyone was talking about him. The boy smiled slyly and said that he just wanted to ask a few questions to their new star. The main character asked again which ones exactly. Tarask's gaze changed instantly. Tarisk extended his hand to him and asked how he saw this world. Vakin was stunned by his words and did not know what to answer. The main character admitted that he did not understand the meaning of this question, and Tarisk shrugged and said that he was simply curious about what the alchemist thought. Vakin, an alchemist himself, looked painfully at how badly their kind was treated. The culture of alchemy had died while magic had flourished, and he honestly could not say that he liked it. The main character did not like his gaze, and besides, he was standing too close. Then Bacon began waving his hands in front of him and insisted that he was not so different, he was just doing everything he could. Tarisk listened to his words with surprise. Then the boy asked if he really said that he had no complaints, and the main character confirmed everything was fine. Tarisk smiled gently at him, thought with an empty gaze that he had not yet convinced him, and said aloud that alchemists always do only one thing, and the boy asked what exactly he meant. The main character smiled slightly at him, and calmly said that they create a better future through alchemy. Then Vakin, smiling broadly, asked Tarisk if he thought the same, and added that all alchemists work for one goal. He even blushed from this. At first he couldn't find the words, then smiled and said that Vacant was right exactly, they all strive to create a better future. Tarisk turned to leave and told Vakin that he had a dream, and one day he would like to share it. The man thanked him for the conversation. The main character did not expect this and stood silently. Zosimo's asked what he was going to say, to which Vakin replied that he had no idea at all. However, he reminded him so much of old alchemist friends that the assistant agreed, saying he was a bit confused and radiated some eccentricity. To this, he indignantly replied that it was rude, they could not be put in the same category. Later, the main character held an envelope in his hands. A great surprise was visible on his face. He asked if he really received an invitation. Dear Shirley, and the guild only echoed his words and declared that this invitation was from His Majesty himself and the Royal Academy of Sciences. To this, the main character shrugged indifferently, said he was not interested, and asked to throw it away. The girl replied that it was impossible. She continued speaking, one does not refuse a royal invitation, and he asked her, saying he was a simple petty adventurer and did not understand at all what was wanted from him. Shirley explained that she doubted whether a simple traveler could defeat that legendary monster that had not appeared since the founding of the country. That was why he was sent the invitation. Vacant simply sighed. At that moment he found himself among other adventurers who were chatting as if he really had performed another feat and was even invited to the capital. To receive an audience with the king, what an honor that was. Zosimo said that it all looked as if that professor was talking about him in the capital, to which Bacon recognized his face and agreed with the assistant. He turned to Shirley again and said that he really did not want to go to the capital, so could he refuse the offer? She said he could not do that, so they would pay for his carriage and hotel in the capital. The girl also said that if he talked too much, he might be given a carriage with iron bars, to which Bacon replied that this is exactly how criminals are transported, and he understood that arguing was pointless. He asked Shirley once again if the invitation applied to those who would come with him, and she replied that accommodation would be paid for everyone he took with him, and the guards would be paid for as well. After some time, the main character went out into the city. He was clearly thoughtful, and Zosima asked him what he was thinking about. Bacon smiled and said he would take this opportunity to go on a trip with Theo. Recently, he had broken a promise to go to a party. Zosimo said that this is a very tricky matter, to which the main character replied that there is one problem, and the assistant immediately looked at him as if mentally asking a question. The main character admitted that he had never before invited a girl on an adventure, to which Zosimo's replied that he was a virgin, and Vakin ignored this and stated that he had an idea. He showed his assistant the perfect plan in 6 steps to persuade the girl to go with him. The first step to create a warm, pleasant atmosphere, and Bacon himself was delighted with this idea. The hero sincerely believed that all this would look natural and not strange at all. This is definitely the perfect plan. After some time, the hero reached Theo. She gently smiled at him, called him by name, and was already about to rejoice at his return, but suddenly fell silent. Vakin jumped up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders, and sharply said that they needed to go on a trip together. The girl was shocked by his words and simply asked again. After some time, the main character shouted, grabbed his head, and said his perfect plan had failed. Zosimo's also confirmed this and said it was a complete failure, while Theo stood there not understanding what was happening. And after a few days, they set off on the road together. The girl was shining with happiness, calling him and telling that in the next town there is a hot spring. The main character smiled and asked her if it was really so, and then suggested stopping there and buying some materials for alchemy. Zosim turned to him and said that somehow they liked the trip to the capital, to which he replied that he was really glad, and then he recalled the reaction of Theo and her father. Vakin said that Edgar gave his consent, so he was grateful to him, and added that maybe they should thank the king for accepting this invitation. The main character sighed. Zosimo said that an invitation from King Selaori 500 years ago would have been a complete disaster. Bacon instantly plunged into memories. When he was invited to meet the then king, he was filled with pride. But in the end, they only talked about money and politics there, and the king turned out to be a boring man who only offended him with his plans regarding alchemy. The aristocrats around him were exactly the same. Alchemy for them was just a tool for their own low goals. The main character then remembered what he felt. At that moment he felt only disgust. He still remembers it very clearly. At that moment Theo called him, "Are you listening to me?" Then added, "These are hot springs of beauty. These are hot springs of beauty." He smiled and replied that of course he was listening to her. The girl continued, saying that even the appearance becomes better when you immerse yourself there. If she dives there, there will be a sea of clients. The main character looked ahead and with a smile on his face said that Theo was already very sweet. The girl was shocked by his words. A thought flashed through Wykin's mind. Women instinctively desire beauty. 500 years ago, orders poured in for serums and beauty elixirs. Maybe make something for Theo too. Theo blushed shyly at that moment. The main hero asked her if the sea made her nauseous, then added that it was strange the potion he prepared for her should have lasted at least another day. Theo smiled and said everything was fine. When he praised her, she felt as if her heart would leap out of her chest, and he added that if she needed more potion, he could give it in about 30 minutes, though he still did not recommend it. Zosimos flew up to the girl and asked her to forgive her master's foolish insensitivity. She laughed and replied that Ken was as usual. The assistant flew closer to the main heroine and said she should know he would not just compliment that girl in such a strange place without reason. The main hero decisively said he was only telling the truth, and Theo was really very sweet and could quite possibly become a model. Then Zosim asked him what exactly he meant by the word sweet. He replied that he had no clear criteria to define female beauty. He valued an expressive face, cherry lips, a gentle gaze, brown eyes, and hair like sun rays. The hero could say much more, but what he liked often depended on the person herself, and of course, if it was Theo, he could be biased. Akin said that he was really strongly drawn to her, so he could not judge objectively. He scratched his chin, a gentle smile appeared on his face, and he said that if he said Theo was sweet, then she really was sweet. The main hero continued to think about this question. It was clear he took it seriously. At that moment, Theo, with a face glowing with embarrassment, said that maybe he would not continue. Vakin looked at her without turning his head. At first the girl sat quietly, then covered her face with her hands. He also shifted his gaze to the road ahead. Suddenly it dawned on him that he had said all this right in front of Theo. At that moment Zosimos thanked him for the detailed explanation, and the boy instantly blushed and began to apologize to her. The girl looked at him hurt and asked if he had really lied. He looked at her in shock. Then Bacon turned away from her and said no. He added that it was too sincere, so he asked her to forget half of it, to which she replied that she would not. She folded her hands in front of her face and shyly said she was glad he had revealed his feelings to her. The main character was still puzzled. A week passed, and Zosim informed that they would soon reach the capital, so they needed to prepare. They reached the royal capital jury, and Theo enthusiastically said that it was so beautiful here, the whole city seemed to shine. She immediately suggested enjoying the capital and going shopping, to which her guardian inquired about the king. Then Vakin grabbed her hand and with a smile said there was no problem. He was in no hurry to get involved in politics, and the king barely had time to meet some alchemist. Theo tried to argue, saying it was an audience with the king, but he waved it off. "I don't care," and at that moment the guards called him by name and asked what his name was. The lady greeted him and said he would be escorted because His Majesty was already waiting. This saddened Vakin, and Theo wished him luck. After some time they reached the castle. The main character was led to the hall. The king of the kingdom of Juri, Janus III, and his subordinates were already waiting there. Vakin greeted him and said he had come immediately after finishing work. He introduced himself as an alchemist named Vakin Ord. One of the men in glasses sharply said that opening one's mouth without permission is disrespectful. The one with the empty gaze thought that introducing oneself used to be good manners. He apologized aloud and asked to start over. The king, without taking his eyes off him, asked intently if he really defeated the legendary monster so easily. Vakin decisively replied that this was not the case at all, and thought to himself that the monster was not legendary at all, but quite ordinary. It appears through some recurring pattern. The king asked if it was just a rumor, and the main character sadly shrugged. Unfortunately, he lives in a remote village and does not know at all what people talk about in the city. At that moment, one of the king's subordinates loudly exclaimed, "What disrespect is this in the presence of the king? He does not even kneel," and still answers with a cheeky smile. Vakin wondered if etiquette had changed again. He admitted aloud that he was from a village and did not really know etiquette. If he had been warned in advance, he would have at least prepared. In a moment, the main character fell to his knees, then asked if everything was all right now, and all his subordinates looked at him in shock. The boy asked what he wanted from him. Vakin added that if he had any requests, he could turn to the Adventurers Guild, and it was there that they would decide how much he would be paid for services. The king said he had heard that the main character prepares and sells magical potions, and immediately asked which ones he could brew. He replied that he could brew many, and himself asked what exactly was needed. Then Vakin raised his eyes to the king. He was also looking at him, and at that very moment the boy suddenly asked if he needed a potion for hair loss. These words terribly angered the king, and after that the main character was arrested. He ended up behind bars. Zosimo said that it was a complete failure. He hoped that his master would be executed quickly. Vakin replied that he was not in a hurry to die, he was simply oriented towards Krinto. He immediately understood what problems people had. The main character asked the assistant if he would come back for him to order the potion, and he replied that it would probably happen in about 3 days, but that did not mean at all that he would be released. Vakin stated that he did not want to sit there, so he suggested that he leave. Zosimo asked how he planned to escape. The boy inquired if a quick teleport would work, and in response heard a firm no. The assistant said they could make a fuss. He was going to escape from prison, but Vakin waved it off. That would be of little use, and suggested approaching the problem positively. Suddenly, a shining object appeared in his hands. The main character said he would brew the king a potion against hair loss, and then the king would definitely forgive him. To this, Zosimo replied that was quite a mature answer, because he thought the boy wanted to kill everyone and escape, and the boy was outraged by these words. Vakin added that it was not only the hair that worried him, he was truly tired. Zosimo said that in this primitive era there were no artificial fairies, so it was no wonder he was so exhausted. The main character said that in his time everyone had their own artificial fairy, and the assistant agreed, adding that people lived better then. Then Vakin suggested making the king an artificial fairy, to which Zosimo shrugged. Isn't that too much? He thought the potion would be enough, and the boy agreed, immediately starting the creation. At first the main character closed his eyes and folded his hands in front of his face. Suddenly he sharply opened his eyes and said that everything needed to be prepared. After some time the potion was finally ready. Zosimo said with a smile that this was wonderful news, as befits such a master. The master himself asked if he was being praised or criticized, and added that a couple more artifacts needed to be made. At that moment a soldier passed by. He noticed that the hero was casting a spell and asked what he was doing. The man asked what kind of device it was and where he got it, to which the boy replied that he wanted to give the king a gift as a sign of apology and asked for help delivering it, and the soldier asked how he opened the door. Vakin said that the lock was primitive and any monkey could open it. He poured liquid metal into it, the lock cracked, and then he asked the soldier if he would take him to the king. Then the man raised his weapon and shouted angrily that it was his duty to stop him. The main character replied that he thought so. At that moment Vakin pulled out one of his artifacts, threw it directly onto the soldier's body, and immediately activated it. At first the man did not understand what was happening. Some unclear substance appeared on his gear, and then his armor began to rust. After a few seconds the man's body seemed to be exposed. He looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. The main character did not react at all. He turned to Zosimo and said that with this they would easily reach the king. The assistant asked if this was really the reason he received this artifact. This substance was called Slime Agent number 18, and 500 years ago people simply went crazy from it. As soon as you throw it, the slime immediately begins to multiply. It dissolves only the outer clothing and exposes the victim, and also affects certain points. It was used for pranks. Quite soon we had to somehow curb its use. At that moment the soldier who was attacked asked again what it was, and then asked to remove it from him. The main character turned to him and said that he would not die from this, so do not worry, you will only be left without clothes and armor. Zosimo said that if they had artificial fairies they would easily free them, but they do not. Vakin replied that they just need to keep going. The main character was walking through the castle corridors when he came across a squad of soldiers. They said they finally found him and now needed to call for reinforcements. After some time, Vekona was surrounded by soldiers. They closed in a tight circle and aimed their weapons directly at him. The boy was a little surprised. Zosimo's asked him what they were going to do, fight, to which he replied that there was no need. He had already created a bunch of slime with a reserve because he was sure he would not go unnoticed. The main character stood calmly, and at that moment several soldiers attacked him. He took out several ampules of slime antidote number 18 and threw them at the attackers. At first, the soldiers seemed to ignore it, but when Vacant activated the potion, it wrapped around the men's armor and the soldiers were surprised. Gradually, the armor and other clothing began to dissolve. They asked in surprise, "What is this?" The men continued to groan and make some incomprehensible sounds. Finally, they saw that the slime was eating away at their clothes and loudly asked about it. Strange sounds continued to echo down the castle corridor, but no one even blinked. After some time, all the men were lying prostrate at the feet of the main character, and he only glanced at them slightly. Suddenly, Bacon scratched his cheek, noticeably nervous, said that this did not look very good, and the assistant agreed with him. The main character turned away and said he did not want to look at the wet men. Zosimo said with a bitter smile that he was once again convinced he had no heart. That boy added that this was the best of the illegal artifacts. The assistant noted that in that case one could simply use an artifact that changes appearance, while Viking admitted that he had not thought about it, but at that moment the girl suddenly lunged at him, and he barely avoided the attack. The stranger tried to hit him several times, but Ui skillfully dodged each attack and then fell to the floor. The main character thought she is fast, completely unlike the other guards. He thought that this was someone strong. The girl said that she found him, calling him by name. The stranger held a sword in her hands. She said she had received the official decision about his execution, so he should prepare. The main character raised his hands up in front of him. He hesitated and said that he had not hurt anyone yet. The girl did not react to this at all. She only slightly changed her pose and told him to prepare for death. It turned out that her name was Princess Guardian Maya Fonte. Wyken tried to explain himself, asked her to listen, and explained that he just wanted to talk to the king. But she did not let him finish. She immediately launched a fierce attack on him, and he barely managed to dodge at the last moment. The girl categorically stated that she would not allow him to approach the king, and Bacon tried to explain to her that he had medicine for that man. Then Maya asked if he really wanted to poison him, calling him a scoundrel. The hero dodged another blow, landing on bent legs, after which he decisively said that she is one of those who do not obey. Vacant began to argue and explain that he just wanted the king to enjoy life, and she replied that he was clearly spreading forbidden substances. He again, shocked, asked for clarification. Maya Fanti said that he dodges her attacks, so he is definitely not an ordinary person, to which he replied that he is just a regular alchemist. Zosimos asked whether to use the artifacts. He replied that for now he could manage without them. The assistant asked why take such a risk since the girl was fighting seriously, and Vacant agreed but hesitated with his answer. The main character began to say that if he took the fight seriously, she would be offended, and after the defeat, she would hardly recover so easily. That guy also added that he did not want to resort to force. What kind of impression would he then make on the king? Maya clearly did not like this. The main heroine kept insisting that she was a girl and that with the weaker sex you can't do that. The girl almost ground her teeth in anger. Her anger went off the scale. She shouted at him that he was a bad person, and then asked if he had underestimated her. The main heroine froze in shock. She really heard him. Maya shouted that she would kill him and cut off his head. The guy thought that now she definitely would not listen to him. At that moment the girl rushed at him and delivered a very strong blow. He was a bit weakened, but his condition was normal, and Maya looked at him thinking that she had hit with all her strength and he was still alive. Zosim said that he had to use a weapon, to which he replied, "It's all right, I was only defending myself, not attacking." The assistant said that this was a strange rule. Zosimo said that he really would have to defend himself, so maybe it was time to yield and use the rest of the artifacts. But that man replied that he would like to avoid further fighting, and he thought to himself that he might take advantage of this. In his head he was already imagining how the potion would affect Maya, and his cheeks reddened a little. At that moment the assistant exclaimed that he was thinking about something bad, and he sharply replied, "Shut up, there is nothing bad here." While he was talking to Zosmos, the girl again attacked him and said that in battle you can't get distracted. He barely avoided the attack at the last moment. At some point she managed to unbalance him. He fell. She shouted that he was caught. As he was falling, he confusedly threw a vial of potion at her. She cut it, but it still hit the target. After a few moments, her armor along with her clothes began to dissolve and she froze in shock, asking, "What is this?" The main hero swore a little when he saw the scene before him. Zosimo said that, of course, this was not what he wanted. This was said clearly sarcastically. Maya Fanti was still struggling with everything. She had almost no clothes left, but she said it was quite lustful and then asked if he really thought that would defeat her. The main character said he was not going to defeat her. She herself broke the test tube, asked him to shut up, and lunged at him, suddenly feeling something. Bacon warned her not to twitch too hard. She again asked him to shut up and added that it would not stop her. But with every step, she felt increasingly uncomfortable. The boy said it was all because she was moving so much. If she calmed down, she would feel better, as would the other guards. Maya Fanti said she finally understood where all the guards had gone and asked not to underestimate her. After all, she was the princess's guard. The girl tried various moves and techniques and resolutely said, whatever happens, she would protect the king's life. But even she was already exhausted. Zosima remarked with surprise that it was strange so few could withstand that slime, and the main heroine agreed that she was indeed a strong girl. At that moment, Bacon said that even she had her limits. He approached her. Then he lightly poked her forehead, and her eyes opened wide, all because of the slime that heightened her sensitivity. The main heroine said that no matter how much she restrained herself, her body was now too sensitive to external influences. Zosim told him that he was a real devil, to which the boy replied that he might look at her a little more. The assistant was silent for a moment, as if hesitating, and asked if it was really worth telling Fio about this. The main character immediately remembered the girl and froze. Then Bacon sharply told him that he had to leave from here. Zosimos noted that his vocabulary contained more than 60 words that could now describe him. The boy asked not to say anything. After some time, they left the castle. The main character said in surprise that, surprisingly, they managed to get out so easily, and the assistant replied that if the castle had been prepared for the attack of the villain, it would have withstood it. Zosimos said that both the captain of the royal guard and even the premier are still writhing with pleasure. The main character, sighing with some relief, reported that at least he managed to slip the elixir to the king, and he had already deactivated the activation code for the mucus drug, so it can be considered that everything is fine. After that, Bacon said it was time to return to Fio because they were already late, to which the assistant replied that he had always known how to ignore responsibility. When they finally reached the Tuesday Hotel, Fio greeted them with a smile, welcomed them, and asked how everything went. The main character smiled gently at her and said that, of course, everything went without any problems. The girl asked how it was for him in the castle, and he sank into thoughts, recalling all the events that had happened. After that, the boy snapped out of his thoughts, nervously scratched his face, and said he was nervous, so he didn't remember everything well. The main heroine thought that the king looked too kingly. She laughed and asked what was strange about that. Bacon changed the subject and instead suggested going shopping, then apologized for making her wait. She, noticing his fatigue, offered him to rest a little. The main character smiled warmly at her and said that everything was fine when he was near. Fatigue would vanish as if by magic. The girl became shy again. Her face instantly flushed, she even trembled. Vacant did not understand what was happening, and at that moment Zosimos said that everything was fine. After that, they finally went outside. Theo asked if they should go to a restaurant, to which he replied that it was his personal idea to go. A smile blossomed on her face. The girl suggested going to the seafood and vegetable dishes restaurant, Bistro Akchai. Bacon said it sounded wonderful and they held hands. The main character blushed at this gesture. Theo giggled, and he asked what she was doing. She replied that it was strange that she was the first to shout at him when they met. Bacon agreed with her, added that she also hit him, and suddenly memories of their first meeting flashed in his mind. The main character said that although it was not long ago, it seemed as if they had known each other for an eternity. He chuckled quietly, and the girl closed her eyes and agreed that she felt the same. After some time, they returned to the hotel. Evening had already fallen, and the main character sat in the room, staring at the diagram. Zosimos said that writing on paper is very old-fashioned, and asked Vakin if he had not forgotten about his artificial fairy. Vakin replied that it is easier to create her when drawing on paper. The main character, with a glow in his voice, said that he is designing an artificial fairy Alina for Fio, and a happy smile shone on his face. Supporting artifact and artificial fairy, a tool that radically changes people's lives for the better. But Zosima, created by Vakin, was designed for something completely different. She has her own artificial intelligence. If needed, other artificial fairies can also express emotions, think, and speak. Zosim listened to his speech and, as if exhaling, whispered that he understood everything. It was his younger sister, and then the main character asked him if it made him happy. The assistant said that this was indeed a difficult question. He asked him what to call this mixture of anxiety and excitement. The hero pondered his question for a long time and finally guessed, maybe this is excitement. Then Zosim said he understood everything, but it seemed to him that he was simply happy. For this he needed advanced alchemical equipment, to which Vakin replied that as long as the towers of the wise stand, such equipment exists. Phil approached the main hero, placed her hands on his shoulders, and asked what he was doing. The boy gently grabbed her wrist and pressed her to himself. He told her it was a secret, did not want to spoil the surprise. The girl replied that it was no longer a surprise, and Vakin responded that it would remain a surprise because she would wait with great interest. A new day came, the sun shone brightly outside the window. Pleasant sounds came from one of the rooms in the hotel. The main hero woke up, scratched his head, and asked who was knocking on his room door, to which he was answered that it was the hotel owner, Chu S1. Vakin opened the door to the man, said that someone had asked to see him, then asked if he had a minute, and the man replied by asking who it could be. The man said that the visitor was a girl from the Imperial Guard. Her name was Maya Fanti. Vakin became nervous when he heard this. Later, the main hero approached her with an awkward smile, called her by name, and asked if she really needed something. As soon as he spoke, her face twisted with displeasure. It was clear that she did not want to see him at all, and she called him by name. The main hero smiled broadly at her and said that the motto of alchemists is "Let's make the world better," then added that he was one of the alchemists and his name was Vacant Ord. Maya looked at him stunned, her face showed extreme fatigue from all this. The boy laughed, and Zosim said that he reminded him of a pseudo-religious guru. The girl simply gave up, sighed heavily, and said that the king was calling him again. He was stunned by these words. The main character said that he had to refuse because he was leaving tomorrow morning, to which Maya indignantly replied that it was a summons from the king himself. Then Vacant said that it was time to return, he had nothing more to do here, and the girl again stated that it was a summons from the king. The hero thought to himself that she clearly would not listen to him. Aloud he muttered that he was generally careless. What if he blurted something out again and was thrown back behind bars? The girl instantly remembered how he had treated her. Her cheeks flushed. She whispered that she also did not want to come here but had to bring him to the castle. Then Maya Fanti said that thanks to the potion the main character had prepared for the king decided to keep silent about what he had done in the castle. Vakin nodded and said that no formalities were needed for the potion, but if you really want, just say thank you, and the girl replied no, and added that he needed to come to the castle tomorrow morning. The main character considered this pure tyranny, fiercely hated those in power, and said aloud that he would come. Maya Fanti turned to leave the room and Arna said, "They are expecting him tomorrow, let him come." The main character thought that he had caused them so many problems and now they were calling him there again. His assistant said that he understood his feelings. Then Vacania made a funny grimace and said that next time he escaped from prison, he would not stop. Suddenly an interesting thought flashed through the main character's mind. Maybe they were all strange there and he was fixated on how he had behaved with them. After this, Bacon slyly smiled and said that this was great news. This time he would prepare 3,000 in advance. After this, his face turned red. He even stuck out his tongue in anticipation and said that Maya Fanti would get the most. Zissimo said that he had saliva flowing from his mouth. He was clearly a bad person, to which the boy asked in surprise if it was true. At that moment, the main character saw how Maya Fanti suddenly fell to her knees, her body trembling. She turned to him with tears in her eyes and said she would kill him, and he muttered a curse under his breath. A new day came. The main character, as promised, came to the royal castle. Many people had gathered there again. Bacon and the king looked at each other, but neither made a sound. The others were silent as well. After this, the king said that first of all he needed to know. No one would ask him about yesterday's behavior, and the boy was surprised. Then the main character thanked him for his understanding. After this, the man in glasses said that they needed to talk about the potion, gratitude, and the reward for it in an envelope. The king joined their conversation and said that now they would like to talk about the future. The main character was surprised by his words. The man said that even after that previous adventure, everyone understood he was a skilled alchemist. If he had been an agent of another country, their country would have been destroyed that day. The main character thought to himself that he had never thought about this at all, and aloud said that such a scenario was possible. The man in glasses noticed this, especially emphasized the words, and said that they had taken this into account. He pointed with his fingers at Wacken and said that they decided to hire him at the castle. The protagonist immediately asked him. The man in glasses said that from now on behalf of His Majesty the King, he would oversee the development of alchemy in their country, and everyone present immediately burst into applause with joy. To this, the protagonist asked what he should do if he does not want everyone around froze with open mouths. At that moment, the guards surrounded him again, holding spears in front of them ready to attack at any minute, and shouted his name again. The man in glasses said that the protagonist is incredibly strong and extremely dangerous, and they cannot allow him to fall into foreign hands. The man added that this is exactly why they must do everything properly. Then Bacon asked him if they really think he can be controlled, and this surprised him. The protagonist said that someone really needed his alchemy. He gloomily added that if he had not escaped from prison, no one would have paid attention to him. Manning's glasses replied that this is precisely why they wanted to draw attention to alchemy. They wanted to create an authority that would be subject to the law. The protagonist said that lying is not allowed. In this country, there are no laws controlling alchemy and alchemists, nor even rules about the sale or distribution of potions made by hand. To this, the man, noticeably nervous, said that it is because they have no expert. Then Bacon said that they really want him to create the law he deems necessary. After that, the protagonist quietly said that he would not be able to communicate. He respects them but refuses to participate in this. At that moment, one of the king's close advisors ran up to him from the side. He pressed a spear to him and asked if he really understood nothing. The soldier insistently said that he could not ignore the king and then turned to Wacken. Maybe cut off his head here and now. It doesn't matter how powerful his artifacts were, there were many of them, they would do their job. The main hero decisively said that with such a number of people he could not be stopped, and the soldier was quite confused by these words. After that, Wacken addressed the king directly. He asked the king if this soldier was acting on his orders, and the king was even surprised by this question. Then the king began to get nervous. He turned to the main hero and told him to wait. His soldier just had a hot temper. But the soldier brushed off these words and declared that he would no longer tolerate it. This man was dangerous for the kingdom, so this evil must be destroyed. The main hero firmly told him, if this man does not obey and wants to kill him, he will be forced to consider him a villain. Wacken also said that the soldier was clearly much angrier than him, and the soldier really flared up with rage because of these words. The man instantly shouted to the protagonist that he was a bad person and swung a weapon at him. At that moment, the boy used activation again. On the body of this soldier appeared slime that began to corrode his clothes and armor, and the man himself did not understand at all what it was and what was happening. The hero calmly explained, "This is preparation from slime number 18. There is nothing to worry about. The soldier simply will not be able to move for some time, and he probably knows this himself." The soldiers who were watching froze in shock. One of them shouted angrily that he had started doing this again. Meanwhile, the clothes on the body of the first soldier almost completely disappeared, and he could only make strange sounds that clearly confused the other guards. The main character rose from his knees, closed his eyes, and said in a calm voice that they were no different from bandits. They decided everything by bad deeds. After that, Wacken turned around and said that their conversation was over, so he was leaving, and the king, calling him by name, tried to stop him. He did not look back at the sound of his voice. He simply told the man to control the people around him. He also added that alchemy leads people to a happy future. It cannot be used for personal gain. The king became nervous at his words, but it seemed he understood something for himself. Zosimo's asked if the medicine could be taken off the commander of the guard Gertie, and Wacken replied that he should rest a little longer. He definitely would not die. A week later, they returned home and immediately headed to the tavern Dancing Duck. Fio smiled and told her father that they were home. The man immediately approached them, greeted them with a smile, and asked how their trip went. Fio said it was very fun and they bought a bunch of souvenirs. The man asked to see them, and at that moment Wacken asked how he managed here without his daughter. He replied that China helped him. The latter greeted him. It was the same girl who had been locked in the mirror dimension. The hero instantly saw scenes from the past in his memory when he saved her, and aloud said he was glad that her health was fine. The girl smiled and thanked him, then added that she was completely healthy now, to which Bacon replied that he was happy for her. Fio sincerely thanked the girl for helping her father, and China replied that there was no need to thank. They definitely needed to rest now, as they had just arrived. Fio smiled and said that she definitely would not refuse such an offer, then gently took the main character's hand and added that they would go upstairs to have some tea. And then Bacon and the girl suddenly understood something. At the same moment, the father also looked at them strangely. He asked what had happened, whether they had really become so close, and when they had even managed to do that. Fio carefully turned around and said that it must have seemed to him. The tea lady supported them and explained that it was quite logical. He had just returned from a journey. The man agreed with an empty look and quietly sighed. He instantly jumped up to the main character and said that as soon as they drank together, he would definitely tell him everything. The boy was shocked by his words. The main character blushed. He tensed up because of the whole situation. The only way out for him was simply to agree. After some time, Bacon and that man found themselves in a bar. Glasses with drinks stood before them, and while his father was talking to him, the boy thought that tomorrow morning he would feel bad again. The next morning, the hero felt exhausted and hungover, sat with his head pressed down, his face pale. The artificial settlement reminded him that the host had drunk 3 times more than allowed, and the young man replied that he remembered. He did not regret it at all. The night of drinking with Edgar was worth it. Finally, they had a good time together, and the system said it would never understand when a person puts instant pleasure above health. Ken pointed to the boxes with bottles and smiled, saying that he managed not only to have fun but also to work. Had made several boxes of this potion. The fairy, with reproach in her voice, noted that even a drunk alchemist could create magical drinks, and the hero added that they had worked a little in the workshop, and soon he would be able to prepare even more. Suddenly Maya appeared before him. She came to him with a request, and the boy instantly understood what exactly the princess wanted from him, who had knelt on one knee before him. He asked what she was doing in such a remote place. Ken noticed that the royal person had knelt down and understood. This was how one should bow, and what he had done before was wrong. The girl officially addressed the horde. Maya resolutely said that by the order of His Majesty she would serve the hero. The young man knew nothing about this decision of the king and hastily said that he had not been warned. The girl pulled out a letter, and the boy quickly opened it. He read that the king wanted to apologize for his arrogant ignorance, so, to show sincerity, he decided to send his daughter to Ken. His Majesty wrote that Maya is an excellent knight and also educated, so she could be useful to him. Jean hoped that Ken would eventually be able to love Jury. The letter ended there. Having read it, the young man had no choice. He had to ask the princess to return home. Maya was outraged. The boy explained that he did not want to have anything to do with the royal family. The girl said she could not return to the castle. She frankly admitted that she was sent to lure the hero with temptation. The young man remarked that it was not always worth being so sincere. He was already about to leave, and the girl tried to stop him. She said that Ken had no right to leave her like that, and the princess reminded him of the shame he had caused her. Now, because of this, no one would marry her. The boy recalled how he threw slime at Maya, which wrapped around her body and did not let her move. He apologized for this and remembered that the king called the girl his daughter. The boy asked if Maya was from the royal family. The girl explained that she was the daughter of a concubine, so many in the palace did not accept her. She quietly added that it was precisely because of this that they decided to send her as a sacrifice. Ken asked not to speak of the plan to seduce him as a ritual murder. He said that he had already made up his mind. The boy had already accepted the apology and was even ready to help if needed, but he did not need an assistant. He asked the girl to return home. Maya, however, was not going to back down. She suddenly approached the hero and asked how many more times she would have to repeat that she was not returning. Ken was stunned by such unexpected pressure and could not answer. The girl trembled and began to mumble something uncertainly. Sorry, I cannot edit text that hints at sexual actions involving minors. If the characters are adults, man and woman, please send a clarified line and I will rewrite it vividly and emotionally. Maya asked him not to think badly of her and not to call her names, but then suddenly changed her mind and asked to scold her even more, and Ken shouted that he did not want to do any of that at all. He could not understand how everything could have turned out that way. The artificial fairy explained that it all happened because the gentleman took drug number 8, which awakened a new fetish in Maya. Ken addressed the princess, asked her to calm down, and reminded her that she was from the royal family, so it was unbecoming for her to behave like that, otherwise she would be condemned. The girl refused to listen to him and said that social norms were already dead for her. No boundaries restrained her anymore. The young man was shocked. He did not know what to do with the princess. Hearing the noise, Fio came out to the boys. She asked Ken if they had a client. The boy replied that they had a regular weirdo. The girl did not understand why he said that. The princess smiled kindly at the innkeeper's daughter and introduced herself Maya von Jury, the new pleasure assistant in Vacanta. Phil was confused. The hero advised her not to take this girl seriously, her very appearance already caused misunderstandings. Maya looked around and, her voice trembling slightly with curiosity, asked if this was their workshop and if there was a tavern here. Theo confirmed, and the princess politely asked if they could prepare a room for her. The innkeeper's daughter gladly agreed. Maya said she would stay for a long time and handed over a whole bag of money. Lights immediately lit up in Theo's eyes. The girl accepted the payment and immediately rushed to prepare everything. Rejoicing that now she and the hero would live together, the princess slyly smiled at Ken. Ord, in turn, was thinking about how to get rid of her. 10 days had passed since the princess moved to the Dancing Duck. Together with Ken, they worked in the garden and picked apples. The boy asked the girl when she would return home, and Maya replied that she was not going anywhere. She reminded him that she was not useless at all. She helped collect alchemical materials. The boy sighed wearily and, realizing that the girl was serious about being his guardian, felt nervous excitement. Bacon turned to the princess and reminded her that he already had a beloved Theo. The girl dropped to one knee and replied that she knew. Maya, with an admiring look, declared that she was not going to be his lover. She wanted to become his servant and an instrument of pleasure. The boy shuddered when he saw that look. It meant he was going to be punished, and he whispered that he would never understand her. The girl still looked at him with a passionate, sad gaze. The boy advised her to return to the capital. The princess shouted that she would not return and demanded that the hero continue to insult her. Ken was already tired of her and sighed heavily. Maya noticed that lately Mr. Vakin has been doing nothing but gathering herbs and fulfilling orders for healing potions. She asked, isn't he going to hunt monsters and overcome that labyrinth? She thought she would be much more useful if he gave her a chance to use her swordsmanship skills. The hero thoughtfully looked at the fruit in his hand. He replied that because of this fruit he could not do it. Ken asked her what would happen if she, as a princess, got hurt while being next to him. From such caring words, Maya felt indebted. Her face flushed and a strong sensation appeared in her mouth. She mumbled that the gentleman had suddenly become so kind, but this reaction only irritated the hero even more. But Ken wanted to do something so much that he thought of going into the labyrinth, and the girl immediately lit up. She stated that she would go there with the hero, but he was categorically against it. The princess asked in surprise why he would not let her go, and the young man coldly replied that he was going there on a mission from the guild in which he was registered. Maya's bed did not belong to the guild, and Ken could not take it with him, so he asked her obediently to stay at home. The artificial fairy praised the gentleman. Zosim thought that the princess would definitely retreat. The boy thought so too, that way he could calmly enter the labyrinth alone. Unexpectedly, Maya handed him a folded sheet of paper. The hero unfolded it and asked what it was. The boy read and understood that the princess was already registered in the guild and even in the same group with Ken. Cold sweat appeared on him. The girl smiled and said that their team was called Slug Lovers Club. The hero exclaimed that it was a very strange name and asked when it was even possible to drag a person into a group without their consent. The princess replied that those were the ghosts of the royal family. The young man retorted that the guild was run by monkeys. The boy was not ready to accept this. Seeing how upset the master was, Maya asked with an expectant look if he would punish her. Ken trembled with helplessness. He could do nothing with the princess. The fairy said that this time the young man had completely lost. Suddenly, the system reported a fight on the western path. The hero ordered Zosimos to observe, and the fairy said that there was one man and a strong monster there. The young man did not understand how such a creature could be in a place where there were usually few monsters and it was relatively safe. The hero activated his powers and said that they were going straight to them. Ken handed Maya a bottle and told her to drink it. The girl asked what it was, and the alchemist replied that it was a speed potion. It allows you to dash about 10 meters in 10 seconds. The young man gave one bottle to the princess and one to himself. Before drinking, he said that the goal of alchemy was to help people, and Ken advised them to hurry. He ordered Zosimos to lead them by the shortest path. The artificial system plotted the route and told the boys to move forward. Soon they came across a huge monster looming over a wounded boy and holding the elbow of his severed arm. The hero saw such a monster for the first time, so he immediately guessed to whom this new species belonged. He ordered the fairy to find information about the enemy. The princess shouted for the boy to be more careful and attentive. Ken ordered the girl to protect the victim, and she instantly rushed to the boy. Meanwhile, another man was preparing to deal with the monster. Circles appeared around him, from which magical swords emerged. The swords flew straight at the monster, but he was indifferent to the attacks. The swords exploded when they touched the enemy's body, but he was still alive. The young man did not understand why he could not wound the monster. The fairy said that she was still checking information about that creature in the archives, and then added that this monster was called the Beast of Hatred. She found mentions of it in records from 500 years ago. The hero's attacks only made it angrier and provoked the beast. They wanted to strike the hero, but he dodged the blow hit the ground. Ken shouted that it was impossible for him not to know about this monster because he had studied the entire archive. The monster did not stop attacking from all sides, and the boy realized, if it were not for the speed potion he drank, he would already be dead. Ken needed something more powerful. He was going to attack the enemy until he found its weak spot. The young man created magical blades of all elements swirling and shining in the air around him. He threw discs at the monster, who defended himself fiercely. With his long and strong arms, he broke the hero's blades. The young man continued throwing them. The monster did not give up. When it was distracted, the boy pulled out the alchemist's staff, jumped up, and swung. He wanted to destroy the enemy with one blow. Ken hit the monster and cut it in half. Although the boy had won, he knew such a monster needed to be studied. Suddenly, he was distracted by Maya's anxious voice. The young man approached her. The girl was sitting next to the boy's body. The princess said that they were late. The boy did not move and his eyes were closed. Ken sat down next to the body and advised the girl not to take her eyes off him. He said that now he would show her what true alchemy of the future could lead to a magical disc formed in the hero's hands. Suddenly, various artifacts appeared around the alchemist, and a huge bowl grew before him, into which he began throwing magical items. Then the artifacts seemed to melt in the bowl, but the hero quickly saved them. He attached the magical items to the disc he held in his hand. A stone emerged from the disc, and the young man pulled it out. Ken raised his hands up, and his power together with the artifacts merged. The hero placed them into a small sphere. Without touching the stone, the boy squeezed a drop out of it with magic, and it fell right on his head. After this, light shone around him, and the boy came to life. He opened his eyes and looked around in surprise, while Maya and Ken rejoiced that he was all right. After some time, the heroes were riding through the forest. The princess was amazed and fascinated by Mr. Wacken's alchemy, and the young man thanked her and said that now she could return home and tell the king about the possibilities of magic. Maya confidently said that she would stay by his side and wanted him to help people. The boy was not thrilled. He had an idea, and the alchemist suggested that the knight tell what exactly he had just done. The girl did not object. Then a continuous barrage of information hit Maya. The hero said he used La Messia's potion, explained in detail what it was and how he mastered this skill, and even managed to recall the conceptual device of the third-generation Nebril. Her eyes opened wide from the avalanche of new information. When the boy finished and asked if she understood everything, Maya could not answer anything. She was simply exhausted. Zosimo's remarked that the gentleman is pure evil. The boy smiled slyly. This was not yet the level of a knight, but having spent time with Maya, he understood that she, though from a royal family, truly worked for the people, and he sincerely considered her a good person. He understood that His Majesty had his own goals and views, which the hero might not understand or accept, but Ken believed that thanks to Maya, he decided to give this country a chance. Fairy noticed that the gentleman had become more mature in his judgments. When the knight and the alchemist returned to the tavern, the knight fell. On the table before Ken lay a fallen monster, and the hero did not understand what kind of creature it was. There were no internal organs, metabolism was incomplete, and the skin seemed made of nettle. The young man stared into the monster's maw and immediately understood it was a predator. But there was no tongue, so the fangs were real weapons. Although the skeleton at first glance seemed human, the presence of a tail and paws revealed an animal. Ken felt that this was not a creature of nature. He asked Zosimo to find more information about this monster, and the fairy fulfilled the request, but no matter how much she searched, the result was the same. Screens with various documents and articles appeared before the young man. Zosimo paid attention to information from the sage of the Modus dynasty. It was unclear but accurate. The hero read it and asked the fairy what she thought about it. Everything he saw and read seemed strange to him. Ken noticed that since the first appearance of the monster, there was no more information about it. He concluded the monster could have caused the fall of the Modus dynasty. The fairy gently reminded him that this was just a supposition. They needed to learn more about the monster's past. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The princess approached him. The girl said that she had already informed the palace about the monster and found out that there were records about it there. This was exactly what the hero needed. He asked if he could look at them. Maya shook her head. It would be difficult because the records were a royal secret. The young man ordered Zosimo's to find out where the royal archive was and how to get there. The fairy said she would find the castle's layout in the database, and Maya hesitated a little but still decided to find out something from the master. She suddenly asked who Bacon really was. The boy did not expect such a question, got nervous, and answered that he was an alchemist. The girl was already expecting such an answer from the hero and immediately said that such an answer did not satisfy her. The young man saw how Maya looked at him. The gaze was full of doubts and anxiety, and he was not sure he could deceive her. The princess asked to understand her correctly and added that regardless of everything, her loyalty to him would not change. Ken casually clarified whether she was rejecting seduction. The hero apologized for asking again and asked why she was so eager to know. Maya blushed. She wanted to know absolutely everything about the man she loved, and for her, this was quite logical. The alchemist did not expect to hear a confession from the knight, glanced at the fairy, and whispered what to do. Zosimo said that the gentleman behaved miserably, and suddenly Maya turned to the magical creature. The girl asked in surprise why she looked like that and what artificial fairy meant. Zosimo replied that she was Vacant's assistant, a kind of artifact, and the young man mentally noted that the fairy behaved very cunningly and cleverly. Maya said uncertainly that she had already guessed, and when it was time for the hero to confess, he, sensing this, objected, saying that he really hadn't told his beloved much about himself, and the girl was interested and satisfied. Suddenly a knight approached the boy and said that, having learned his secrets, being his woman, she would be one step ahead. The boy immediately began to object, not understanding anything, and asked if Maya really wanted to make him punish her in this way. The princess said that when her father treated her mother cruelly, she thought she would never love a man, but as soon as she met the gentleman, love overwhelmed her. Finally, the girl sighed and asked for forgiveness. She said everything she wanted, so she was going to leave. Only before leaving, Maya asked him to forget everything. She confessed that she just wanted to be honest with the one she loves, that's all. This openness and sincerity overturned the hero's decision. He stopped the princess. Ken, although he could not tell the details, still admitted he really was reborn, and the princess looked at the young man in surprise. The hero's gaze became both serious and sad at the same time. Ken said that he was a man from the times of a modest dynasty, an alchemist who lived 500 years ago. Meanwhile, Taresk sat on a cold mountain. He was gnawed by resentment towards Ken, but despite this he still acknowledged the hero's truth. Taresk nodded. Alchemists really strive to create a bright future, but he wanted the young man to remember one thing. The boy's face twisted with anger and bitterness. His eyes darkened. He was going to remind Vacant of all his sins. When Maya learned the truth that the gentleman was reborn, she again, stunned, asked. The young man confirmed and explained that due to certain circumstances he had slept for 500 years, and although he looked young, he was actually 40 years old. The girl agreed and noticed that Ken was extraordinarily calm for his age. Now the princess knew his true self, and the boy asked if she felt better. The fairy flew up to her master. She asked if the gentleman really knew what he was doing. He did not understand what Zosimo was talking about because she did not stop him. Maya, understanding everything, smiled. He was pleased that Ken opened up to her, and she thanked him. The boy nodded. He caught himself thinking that maybe he just needed someone to listen to him. The alchemist whispered into the night that he also felt lighter and thanked him. At that moment, Maya's true nature broke through the tension and burst out. She asked if the secret was now just between the two of them, and Ken, hesitating, replied that it was she who was obliged to keep it. Looking at the princess, the boy asked in surprise where her seriousness had gone. The girl insisted otherwise. She asked if he could date someone because in reality he was 40 years old. The young man corrected her slightly. He said that in his previous life he had not yet turned 40, so now he was somewhere in his 30s. From this news, Maya started to have a nosebleed. The boy did not understand why the girl reacted that way and called her behavior unacceptable. The girl asked to be scolded even more. A few days later, when everyone was ready, Ken unexpectedly said he wanted to visit his hometown. Everyone was surprised. The hero explained that he intended to work outside the village, so he decided to visit the city at the same time. Fio and Maya approached the young man and enthusiastically said they would go with him. The boy tried to dissuade them, saying the road would be long and dangerous, and the artificial fairy took the owner's side and added that they would encounter monsters along the way. Fio confessed that she wanted to see the place where her beloved lived. Ken felt her emotions and pondered. The boy knew that Maya would stand up for herself, but he had doubts about Fio. Suddenly, Zosim outran the master and agreed to take the girl on the journey. Ken did not expect this. Theo rejoiced and hugged the fairy, while the hero grumbled inwardly that Zosim should help him, not take away the love of his girl. The boy had no other choice but to turn to Edgar for help. The man laughed and said the boy was old enough to want to return home. He asked Ken to take the girls with him. Edgar asked to send his greetings to his parents. The boy froze at such words. The hero could not tell them the truth. His parents had long died, but for Theo it was a great opportunity to see Midas. The boy wanted his beloved to finally know who he really was. Watching the girl play with the artificial fairy, Kina was torn by doubts. Would Theo be able to accept him when he found out the truth, since modern people might consider him a living dead man? Maya told Via that tomorrow morning the first thing they would do was go to the market and prepare for the journey. The girl was delighted with this plan, and the hero thoughtfully looked into the night and thought that maybe, with the help of the princess, they would manage to have a good time. Maya noticed that the gentleman was looking at her and immediately blushed and jumped for joy. Ken finally smiled and agreed to take the girls with him, and Theo confessed that she was curious what her beloved's hometown would be like. The journey lasted 3 days, and when the heroes finally reached the place, the artificial fairy announced that they had arrived, but before them stretched a wasteland. The girls did not understand anything, so Maya asked Zosmos if she was sure they were in the right place, and the fairy replied that the city was underground. Zosmos shone, the ground trembled beneath the heroes. The fairy opened access to the emergency exit. When the extra stones and buildings collapsed, the boys saw a single stone entrance before them. Inside, they were awaited by a spiral staircase leading down. The young man began to descend first, then the girls followed. The fairy apologized, saying they wanted to make an elevator, but nothing worked out, and the hero replied that it was still better than Rex. Zosmos nodded to the owner in agreement and said that so far no problems with ventilation or lighting had been found. Theo whispered to her beloved, "Where are we going?" The hero replied that they were heading to the ruins of the city of Modus. The girl asked distrustfully, "Isn't that his hometown?" The young man replied that he would have to explain for a long time and added that Modus was undoubtedly his hometown. Candles lit up in the corridor and, pushing the boys aside with light, revealed a view of the city lying in ruins. Ken greeted the girls in the city of Modus, and Maya said that the cityscape, as if painted with gold and silver, took her breath away, and the boy noted that everything no longer looked so magnificent. Much had been destroyed. Theo looked at Modus with a smile and admitted that this city seemed unreal and fairy tale-like to her. The young man heard this. He approached her and asked again. The girl said that their people have a famous fairy tale, the Golden City Modus. Ken asked the fairy about it, but she knew nothing about it. Zosimos asked Theo to tell them that story. The artificial fairy was going to record the narrator's voice and save it in the archive. The girl admitted that she would feel embarrassed. Zosimos explained that she would play the recording every night as a bedtime story, and Theo was not bothered by this at all. She began to tell. Long ago, Duel was a young boy in a village whose younger sister was seriously ill. He worked every day to buy medicine, but the girl was getting worse and worse. So the boy decided to take her to the Golden City of Modus, to the wizards about whom a traveler once told him. He knew that in exchange for help they would demand treasures and obedience. No alchemist agreed to help the youth because he brought too little money and treasures. Although the magicians were already bathing in unheard-of wealth, they still wanted more gold and silver. The boy was confused and did not know what to do. The young man was left on the street with his sick sister in his arms, and when he fell into despair, someone noticed him. When he listened to the young man, he only smiled. His face, however, was kinder than any wizard in the city, and the man extended his hand, saying that the boy was lucky to have met him. As soon as the alchemist said this, he immediately waved his wand and cast a spell on the poor girl. Her body began to glow. She immediately felt completely healthy. The girl could jump and run again. She felt much better. Then the youth sincerely thanked the wizard and asked why he was so kind to them. Before answering, the wizard took off the hood from his cloak. The alchemist smiled and replied that for him the most important thing is always to be kind to people. Then he turned into the wind and disappeared, and the sister and brother were grateful and decided to live by his rule. When Phil finished the story, the fairies and the hero understood everything. The girl added at the end that it was a famous fairy tale known to the entire Jewish community, and was surprised that Ken did not know about it. He reluctantly agreed. Suddenly, Zosimos declared that the sorcerer from that story was the master himself, and Theo, not understanding what he meant, asked how Ken could be involved in that story. The artificial fairy took away the boy's magic. She said that in that distorted city of gold and silver, greed flourished and good people were rare. The boy approached his beloved and apologized for not telling her anything. Theo still did not understand what he was talking about. The boy confessed that he was a man who lived 500 years ago. Seeing the question in the girl's eyes, Ken explained that he was born a very long time ago. The young man Pio surprisingly lit up with a smile. She was stunned now. It was clear to her why her beloved knew so much. Noticing that Maya was not surprised, the girl asked if the princess already knew about this secret. She boasted that she found out about it before Theo. The girl pursed her lips and said she was jealous of her. She asked if recently the princess and Ken had been close. The boy said that although it sounded incredible, he was on Theo's side. The hero asked his beloved if the news about him did not repel her after all. He was 500 years older. Theo smiled gently and replied that she did not care because her lineage always remains the same. She came closer and pressed her forehead to his. The girl admitted that she was surprised when she found out that her boyfriend turned out to be a wizard from a fairy tale, but it was precisely because of this that she loved the story even more. Maya watched the couple with a smile as if expecting something. The artificial fairy drew the gentleman's attention to this and asked if he would hug her too, and the young man replied that it was not necessary. He explained what the girl was feeling. She feels like a miserable knight who is neglected and secretly enjoys it. The boy advised Zosimo's to look at the princess's face, who was holding herself back with all her might in front of Theo. The fairy sighed and agreed that Maya had already been rewarded for this, and the trembling knight said that she was the master's servant and had nothing to fear because she was a warrior. Suddenly Ken called her to him, stretched out his hand and said that since the girl knew his secret, she had become part of the family. Maya and Theo together approached the young man and hugged him, smiling cheerfully. The heroes moved deeper into the ruined city. The princess noticed, no matter how far they went, all the streets were covered with gold. The young man said that alchemists of that time could get rich as soon as they learned to move gold. He added that the precious metal was so widespread that people built houses from it to show their superiority. Moreover, Modus had many battle alchemists, so other countries feared it. But even such a powerful city, which was prophesied to prosper for thousands of years, simply disappeared. The boy did not understand why it happened, but intended to find out everything. Along with the era, experienced alchemists disappeared, and Ken realized, if that catastrophe repeated, everything could end much worse. All his friends and loved ones could die. The hero's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a fairy. She said with a smile that from the 3 nearest towers of the wise she squeezed out as much information as she could. Zosimo's asked if the master was ready to listen to her, and when Ken became noticeably nervous, the girls approached him to cheer and support him. They smiled warmly and nodded to him. Then the young man asked the artificial fairy to show him everything. Zosimo's obeyed, and a screen appeared before him. He saw terrible scenes of a bloody massacre. Monsters of hatred attacked the city of Modus, tore the flesh of the inhabitants, and killed everyone they saw, and people tried to defend themselves, but nothing helped. The heroes did not expect to see such monsters. Zosimo said she had something else to show the master. She opened a new screen, and what the boys saw shocked them. Systems similar to Zosimo's attacked people. Ken was stunned by what the artificial fairies were doing. Zosimo suspected that something was wrong with the central control system of the fairies, the mother core. Theo asked if the system was okay, and the fairy replied that she worked independently, regardless of the general system, because the mother core did not affect her. That was exactly how the master created her. Ken explained that Zosimo's had her own mind, and he would never have dared to connect her to the general system. His fairy was special among all the others. That man asked if she could find out the cause of the breakdown. Zosimo's explained that the mother core is an almost perfect centralized control system. The fairies were vital, they provided protection. Zosimo said that the disaster Ken saw happened because of people. She advised the gentleman to look at what was happening to the wounded. Just as the young man was about to reproach Zosimo's for showing death before Theo, he saw a horror. People's bodies began to melt from the inside, and something came out of them. It was a beast of hatred. The assistant explained that this is the true nature of these monsters. They grow from the bodies of people who were under some influence of artificial fairies. At that moment, the boy realized that the country was destroyed by the most reliable system, and apparently someone used it against the people. Zosimo's revealed that 500 years ago there was a bloody massacre due to the cultivation of artificial intelligence, and because of the potion's effect on people's bodies, monsters were born. This unexpected truth stunned Ken. Needed time to comprehend everything. Zosimo's took the master's side as she was also shocked by the news. The boy could not understand what distinguished the survivor from those who died. Firstly, his fairy acted autonomously. It was not connected to the mother core. Secondly, the cradle of rebirth came to his aid. Thirdly, he had subordinates whom he could fully trust and rely on. He turned over in his mind what could have happened in that laboratory on the day of the disaster. It was lucky that his artifact was hidden deep underground. That is why he ended up in the future. He believed he could have prevented this nightmare if only he had awakened. But there was no time. Ken was reborn 500 years after the terrible events, and the young man shuddered at the thought that he could not prevent this horrible chain of events. Seeing the boy overwhelmed with emotions, the girls became worried. They sat next to their friend and tried to convince him that he was not to blame for anything. Suddenly, a screen flashed before the young man. The artificial fairy said she had found something else that might be important for the master. At that moment, his team appeared before him and greeted their boss. Ken was left speechless. He did not expect to see old friends at all. They said that Modus was over and wanted to record a farewell message to the boss, and they themselves were going to leave the laboratory and try to stop the catastrophe. At that very moment, a monster of hatred broke through to them. The girl gathered her courage and said that since this was their last day, she would take the chance and confess her feelings to Ken. The comrades were shocked. The boy confidently smiled at the camera and thanked the hero for taking him into the team, promising that he would not let the monsters destroy everything. Another comrade apologized for changing the settings of the rebirth cradle and assured that the boss's illness would be completely cured and would not return. He had no idea that he would wake up after hundreds of years and then wish the leader a good rest. The comrades promised to protect his body with their lives. The girl said again that she loved Ken. When they parted, they wished that he would finally start living for himself, and the recording cut off. Phil's eyes filled with tears. She said that her beloved's friends were good people. The young man agreed with her. They were the comrades he had been missing. The master ordered Zosima to break the black boxes in every alchemical laboratory and collect all the information about the mother core and monsters from there, because he especially wanted to find out how a monster of hatred appeared near Sullivan. The artificial fairy obeyed. The hero decided to figure everything out. Many sages and brilliant alchemists lived in the ruined city, but they could not change anything. Only Ken remained, and only he could do something. He knew he had to take this chance to live anew and create a better future. He would not allow the catastrophe to happen again. Several days passed after Modus's visit. The guys gathered in the tavern. When the young man said goodbye to the girls, Theo became worried and asked if he could manage alone, and Ken smiled and assured her that it was just a small investigation. Maya was not going to leave the gentleman alone. The man explained that he was the only person who, thanks to artifacts, had the combat power of an entire army. The girl did not know what to say. She retreated and promised to gather the knights and scour the outskirts, and the young man, having collected all the information from Zosima, finally identified the most suspicious place, the one that could be trusted. It was a burial forest with ruins hidden in its depths. Dangerous monsters had settled there. The archive said that many wizards had died there. Back then they were called alchemists, the gems of time, so it was quite possible that they remained among the remains. Ken was undoubtedly sure that this was connected to the beasts of hatred. This prompted the hero to set out there to find out the truth about these monsters. In case they appeared again in the district, the young man asked Maya to gather knights for a patrol. The princess and the alchemist climbed to a height and looked down at the gathered knights. Ken did not expect that Maya herself would lead them. The girl replied that if it was for the people, then it was for the country. She said that if the gentleman understood it was dangerous there, then he should return. He asked her not to worry about him and added that he could protect himself. The young man was worried that nothing would happen near the city. The princess said she was ready to give her life if necessary. The hero sharply turned to her and said that she must survive because she was dear to him. The girl was delighted. She was scolded and at the same time told that Ken cared about her. The young man repeated that he did not want the princess to get hurt and said that if there was danger, she would take Theo and run away. Remembering former comrades who gave their lives for the safety of the chief, he bitterly asked Maya not to take on too much. The girl did not understand why he said that. The boy quietly asked if he could complain. The princess did not object, and he admitted that he did not want to be alone and did not want any of them to get hurt, to which the girl replied that she understood him. The boy confessed that he was scared. Ken did not want it to happen again. He had already lost a lot and did not want to lose more. Maya said that if that man could live happily and create a wonderful future, his comrades would also be happy. Ken froze in surprise, then muttered that she was probably right. The princess came closer and whispered that he was capable of great deeds, but he himself did not remember this, after which she leaned in and kissed him on the forehead. The girl insisted that the boy must definitely return to them after all. Even the princess herself kissed him, and at the end asked him not to tell Fio about it. Ken entered the graveyard forest together with the artificial fairy and asked if Zosimo's noticed any signs of life, but she found nothing. An hour had already passed since they entered the forest. The hero felt the air become noticeably heavier, and Zosimo's warned that broken artificial fairies might appear here, so they should be careful. Suddenly the boy heard a ringing that was coming closer and closer. The fairy explained that it was due to movement magic in the air vibrates and produces a bell-like sound. The young man suddenly realized that an undead might be standing before them. Zosimo's detected no signs of life. The fairy suggested it could be a guardian of the ruins, and at that moment something cut through the tree trunks right in front of the hero. Magical blades rushed at the hero and he dodged as best he could. When there were too many, he threw an explosive, and after the explosion a witch appeared right before him, much larger than the young man. She was the one from whom the ringing came. Ken asked if she could speak. The boy introduced himself as a traveler and alchemist, and the witch began muttering about the Lord of Death, destruction, and the end. The monster said it would bring destruction and death to everything. She asked someone where they were. Ken understood nothing. The artificial fairy suggested it was an automatic reaction to the word alchemist and said she conducted a full analysis. Zosimo said that an artificial fairy was definitely standing before them. The witch's body began to decompose rapidly, and a monster resembling a huge insect crawled out of it. The monster began to squeak. It asked its master where he had been and said that a new era was near. Zosimo asked the master if he also saw an artificial fairy before him, but in the shell of a beast of hatred. The master agreed. However, the boy was glad about this. He was confident that he had enough strength to defeat the enemy. The alchemist mentally addressed his fallen comrades to watch. He intended to show them his true power.